Welcome to the second day of our United in Sustainability Summit. I'm Tom Kurian, Program Manager for UNFCU's Global Sustainability Program, the Credit Union Industry Team, and Vice President of Security at UNFCU. And for those who are just joining us, we have you covered. We have recorded yesterday's session and we'll make it available to you and other attendees. I'd like to welcome Carlos Calderon back, Chief Executive Officer and President of UIS FCU. UIS FCU is our event co-host, and Carlos wrapped up yesterday's event and gave us a glimpse of what we have to look forward to today. We're delighted that Carlos is ready to kick us off. Carlos, over to you in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone, and greetings from Washington, D.C., and welcome to the second day of the United in Sustainability Summit. Yesterday, we had an amazing day which started with a report from COP26 and an awakening on how close we are to reaching the breaking point in the planet. To various examples of credit unions and practitioners with a new line of green products and services, to a youth call to action on the SDGs. In all, a fantastic first day of the summit. Today, we have in store another exciting and transforming day, with sessions and presentations designed to highlight more of what's already in place supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. Programs on development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, discussion on socioeconomic impact on climate change in marginalized communities, resilient stories from credit unions in areas affected with climate change, pandemic and social justice, impacting on credit unions, and measuring your sustainability progress. Our objective is that everyone attending the conference can realize that we can all be part of the journey towards sustainability together, regardless your level of expertise on the subject. Do you realize that you have already started on your journey by being here today? There is an entire community ready to support you and to take you to the next level. Now, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Renee Sattiewhite. Renee is the President CEO of the African American Credit Union Coalition. With over 30 years in the world of finance, she started her career as a teller trainee from City National Bank in Beverly Hills, California. She quickly moved up the ranks with various positions, including bank officer. She has been associated with credit unions for over 25 years and was the first internship program director for the AACUC. Renee's background is in training and marketing, specializing in customer service, effective communication, board development, team building, and strategic planning. A graduate of the Oglethorpe University with a bachelor's degree in communications, she is credited for giving organizations a new look in the areas of customer satisfaction, employee relations, and marketing materials. Renee, please take it away.
Gracias, Carlos, and thank you for having me. Thank you to the organizers, and Carlene, thank you for inviting me to do this. I am so excited. Now, you're talking about sustainability, and I'm like, what can I bring to that? What can I talk about? And what I thought about was explaining what the difference is about checking the box of DEI. If credit unions do not get it together, they're not going to be sustainable. If they don't see DEI the same way that they see getting deposits for their members so that they can loan out the money, if you don't see that, sustainability is not going to happen. DEI absolutely is so important. And when you're looking at, I'm going around all these different countries and states, just doing the talks that I do. Thank God for Zoom, because I can reach these different countries. But I've noticed now that there is DEI fatigue. So what does that look like? What does that mean, DEI fatigue? I think that people are so curious now, oh, well, DEI this and DEI that. Instead of looking at it in that fashion, look at it from another viewpoint. What viewpoint is that? One where you can tell and see that you want to make an impact and a difference. DEI is not going away. We want to have credit unions be sustainable. We want the planet to be sustainable. So again, I say that credit unions have to remember that D&I will make the difference for your credit unions. When you are looking at a program, learn what you need to learn. It's important that you check the box in this way, that you're looking at, I can check the box, but I'm learning something. I'm leaning into whatever educational opportunities that my credit union is offering me, or the things that I can do on my own. I feel really bad when people tell me that they're tired of hearing about DEI. They feel like it's being shoved down their throat. I get that. I get that. I live DEI. That's what I do every day. I get it. However, if we're going to make a difference, if you're going to have change, it has to be sincere. You have to be authentic. It's okay if you're fed up with DEI. Say you're fed up with it. Let people know where you're really coming from. Be authentic with it. And if you're telling an authentic story, if you're being authentic about it, then guess what will happen? Then someone can really talk to you. You can open up. You can be very precise about what you need. So I say to you, all of you, if you're looking at just checking the box, I'm good with checking the box, but make sure that you're intentional about learning something. Make sure that you get familiar with the terms of DEI, that you understand what being mindful is, what being sensitive is, and being open-minded. It's so important for us as a community to make sure that we are appreciating everyone for their differences. All of us on this call, what a wonderful opportunity to engage and have someone be pushing forward, having us say, yes, we can do this. How can we get out of our own way? ACC did a virtual conference in August, and our theme was be bold, be mindful, be brave. And I decided I wanted to take that through the rest of the year. So October was our Be Bold month, November's our Be Mindful month, and next month is Be Brave. I challenge you to be mindful this month. Yes, it's Thanksgiving, and all of the ways that we can take care of our members, take care of ourselves and our families. D&I is so important in the space of making sure that everyone is heard, everyone feels like they belong. We want our planet to be robust, and we want to keep it in good shape. So I love that we're having this conference. I absolutely love that you guys have taken the time to address things that are very serious for us. When the song was playing, Mercy, Mercy Me, oh my God, look, it's just such great information, but it's just so relevant. So when I say, I'd like to say to people, I'm the possibility of people serving other people passionately. I'll say that again. I'm the possibility of people serving other people passionately. And in serving people passionately, which all of you do, credit unions are terrific. The credit union system has such an opportunity to bring people together. And I do believe that if we practice some of the tenets that we have in our cooperative principles, that we can not only sustain credit unions, we can change hearts and minds. We can find credit unions and credit union people and members. We can come together and we can bring people to a place of understanding. That's the most important thing. What are you intentional about? What are you grateful about? When you're looking at how you can implement DEI programs, or just any programs actually, but for instance, DEI programs, when you're looking at that, there is a structure, there is something to be said. But most importantly, it's important to really look at yourself and decide, I'm going to do this. Just as you took the job, it's important to know that part of that job is to be mindful and to be bold and to be brave. So how can you do that? Here are some of the ways that you can do that. You can look at opportunities. What's the next opportunity for you? What's the next opportunity for your credit union, your job? When you're looking at the opportunity through a DEI lens, you're bringing everyone in the table. You're bringing everybody to it, and you're a sense of belonging. I am so concerned about what we're going to do as a credit union if we don't get over ourselves when we're looking at, well, DEI, I'm just tired of it being thrown in my face. I tell you, it's important that you look at it from the depository standpoint and the loan standpoint. If you look at it just as you do your business practices, I promise you, your credit union will thrive, your organization will thrive so much better, your community will be greater, and it will be led to in such a degree that your credit unions and your institutions people will want to flock to you because they feel like they belong. If you don't look at this in a different perspective, all the opportunity, checking the box, that's not, again, I don't have a problem with people checking the box, and here's why. If you check the box, at least you're getting some of that information. My job is to encourage you to go deeper with it, not to just check the box, but to go deeper with it. Make sure that you're being mindful. Make sure that you're looking around to see opportunities that you can share with other people. Being open and honest is really hard sometimes for people, but if you make a sense of belonging, if you make them feel like they're valued and appreciated, then you can go further. I'd like to also talk to you about being mindful during this season. When you're relating to people, what can you do to make someone's day? What can you do to make someone smile? If you can imagine, if you can, put in the chat what you can do for somebody that's nice. December of last year, I made a decision to give this, one of my girlfriends, she moved 2 hours away from her mom, and she got married, she moved away. And it was such an opportunity for me. Her mother was 83 years old, and I told her for 1 year, I'll bring you dinner once a week. She's a fiery older woman, and she's really doing well. She's got a disabled son at home, and I wanted her to feel like she was special, that I bring her whatever she wants once a week. Because I travel so much, it varies which day I do that, but it makes me feel better that I'm doing something for somebody else, and it makes her feel special and loved. So what can you do for someone at your credit union, for someone at your membership, someone in your family, someone in your community? What can you do to lighten someone else's load? What can you do? Again, sustainability. That goodness helps us to sustain ourselves. When you do something nice for someone else, it opens up a door. It opens up a doorway for you to see that you can make a change, you can make a difference. Now, how does that relate to DEI? Again, that's being mindful. When you're being mindful, it opens up a whole other avenue of things that you can do for other people and for yourselves. During this month of November and being mindful, it is so important to look at opportunities. Again, if you're going to check that DEI box, it's important that you go deeper. And so I say again, it's so important to remember, and I keep stressing this for a reason, DEI is just as important as your deposits and your loans. So as a credit union community, we want to make sure that we are open and honest and authentic. Being authentic is the best thing you can do. I try not to do anything that is offensive, but I had a DEI graduate from our DEI Leadership Academy. She told me yesterday, she said, Renee, you can't say that. And because I've been saying that term for years and years and years, when she checked me on it, and I'm glad she did, it reminded me that that term was derogatory. But because it had been such commonplace for years and years and years, it had become slang in our vocabulary, I needed to be reminded of that. So I'm not perfect. The DEI journey is a difficult one. It's not easy. But what it can be exhilarating when you have the right attitude. Attitude is everything. Attitude is everything. So if you're in your seats and you're just listening, I want you to raise your hands and be excited. Give me some jazz hands. Be excited about DEI. Be excited about your life. Be grateful that you're above ground. And also make sure that during this season, this holiday season, you take time for yourself, that you recognize that it's important for self-care. If you don't do that, you will burn yourself out. this DEI journey, this credit union journey, and being sustainable, it's absolutely critical to make sure that you take care of yourself. As they say on that plane, if something happens and there's an emergency, you put that breathing device over your nose first before you take care of anybody else. So I implore you to take care of yourselves, be mindful, and see what you can do for someone else as well. On that note, I'm going to turn it back over to Carlene, and I'm going to say thank you again for allowing me to speak with you today.
Wow. First of all, fantastic. Great energy, Renee, for kicking us off. Community, authenticity, credit union winning concepts that was going on in the chat. And I love that concept of if the first step is checking the box, it's still a first step. And every journey starts with that first step. And let's take it, right? And I think that's great. Really valuable insights. Thank you. And as you mentioned, right, DEI is an integral part of the sustainability journey. And yet our very next, we have how to learn and from business and employee resource groups and staff development and employee retention with our own Carlene Alexander, Global Diversity Officer at UNFCU. She's over the past 20 years at UNFCU. Carlene has held a steady progression of roles in our human resources team. She also serves on an advisory council of our UNFCU Foundation. Carlene holds a master's degree in human resources and labor relations from Brew College and City University in New York, as well as a diversity and inclusion professional certificate from Cornell University. And she's a member of the Society of Human Resources Management, as well as HRNY. Carlene, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom, and so much excitement from Renee there. We have quite an act to follow, but this is great. And I attended yesterday. I just want to note briefly that if you did not attend yesterday, definitely listen to the recording. Those who are not here are missing out. And then following up that, Renee, very important messages on authenticity, or even if you experience DI fatigue, use that to propel you forward, deeper dive, digging deeper into it. So without going too much more into what we heard, I'm gonna introduce our panelists today. I am privileged to share the DEI space with these individuals, beginning with Faye Fachishe, who is our Chief Marketing Officer. Faye has been a DEI champion from the onset of the program, first serving as the chair for the Women's BRG, and now serving as a sponsor for our multicultural BRG. You'll hear more about Faye's passion. That definitely comes across, and you will hear about that as she speaks to the panel. Then we have Ayana Gabriel, who is our Senior Manager of Strategic Marketing. Ayana is another DEI champion. Ayana first began her DEI legacy in our LGBTQ plus BRG as an ally. Her passion was fueled by wanting to learn more on how to support somebody who was near and dear to her, was part of the community, and she now serves as the chair for our Women's BRG. And then we have Jamie Raggy, who is an HR business partner who currently leads several DEI initiatives in our LGBTQ plus BRG and our Women's BRG. I don't say this lightly. One of Jamie's superpowers, and just one of them, is that she's known for her innovative approaches, what she brings to the BRGs, and I really look forward to her sharing all these innovative approaches with you. So ladies, about to begin, and the first question will speak with Faye. So Faye, why have the BRGs been such an essential piece of the success of our UNFCU's DEI program? Why do you think?
Well, hello, Carlene. Thank you for having me on the panel, and hello to all the participants. So why have the BRGs been so successful? They really provide a safe space for all the group members to discuss and collaborate about some of the challenges that they face and ways to overcome those challenges. And that, I think, has been a really unique forum that didn't exist before the BRGs were formed, because some of the topics can be very sensitive. And yet the BRGs provide a forum where we can openly discuss these sensitive issues, but in a respectful way, and focus on solutions and ways to overcome them. I mean, the learning that comes from these BRGs is not limited to allies who have joined the groups. As you mentioned, I was part of I continue to be part of the Women's BRG. And as part of that, I learned so much about I became so much more aware about unconscious biases and dynamics that women face in all aspects of life. So I think becoming aware of those things, it gives us the power to be able to address them and change them as we recognize them more. And it's really a wonderful learning opportunity, because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. So the BRGs have really helped elevate our knowledge level and our awareness of what we go through and our colleagues go through and how we can support one another.
Thank you, Faith. You said something which was very instrumental there. You know, the BRGs providing these safe spaces. UNFCU had these conversations which we had not had before. I think about the multicultural BRG facilitating that conversation after the events of January 6th, which you were so instrumental part of that. So, you know, that has really been something which has been great at UNFCU. So thank you, Faith. So I'm going to go over to Ayana next. So Ayana, you now Women's BRG Chair. So how has that impacted your role as a chair? How has that impacted your role as a leader at UNFCU?
Being a chair for the Women's BRG has just helped me to gain confidence and also share more of my experience as a leader and learning. That ability to be open to learning, even though you're a leader, does not stop you from learning and growing. Part of being a leader is growing. So as you continue to lead, you learn from your colleagues things that you probably would not have learned in your regular day-to-day job and functions within the organization. And actually collaborating with different departments has also opened up the doors to really understand individuals that I don't necessarily work with every day. And that's helped me to just strengthen relationships, build teamwork, and also just build a brand for UNFCU in general to show that, you know, the BRGs are part of the brand as well. And in my experience, it's having the opportunity was one of the best things that could have happened to me personally. I think my relationships even strengthened outside of work, which I did not. It didn't happen intentionally. I think it happened as being able to have open discussions about different topics that is involved in the BRG. I can talk to them about with my family. I can share those experiences that I've learned. As you mentioned, I was an ally for the LGBTQ BRG. I was able to share my experiences with my family and friends and have open dialogue that probably would never have happened if I did not join the BRG. So leadership is there, but also strengthening learning was also there as well.
Thanks, Ayana. And that is key, right? Learning, being able to be open to learning, that is an essential piece of the DEI journey. You're right. As a leader, it gives you the opportunity to learn, not necessarily only the things in your current role, but basically you get to interact with other individuals and learn how, you know, things around the organization, even our social atmosphere, is impacting them. And that in itself is a powerful story. So I'll now go over to Jamie. So Jamie, you know, you're a business partner here at UNFCU. How has that impacted the way you contribute to our BRGs?
Thanks, Carlene. In my opinion, I'm optimally positioned to be one of the biggest advocates of the BRGs for employees and managers. As an HRBP, a large portion of my responsibility is collaborating with designated business areas to address management and employee needs. So I often find that I'm promoting the BRGs during my interactions with management, with staff, for various reasons. So it could be to help a new employee acclimate to our culture and organization, maybe to interact with employees who normally wouldn't, or to find growth and development opportunities. I also meet individually with each new hire at UNFCU, and through our conversation, the BRGs always come up. And I encourage everyone to take a look and join if they're interested. Employees are always surprised to hear all the fun as well as important things that we do in the BRGs. And more often than not, they end up joining. And when I'm talking with managers, you know, discussing their staff and their progress, BRGs often offer an opportunity for development that maybe an employee's day-to-day responsibilities might not have had. particularly in leadership skills. And beyond that, as a participant in BRGs, I think I bring a diverse perspective. Because of my role, I have this unique insight into the wants and needs of employees, as well as insight into our strategy and business decisions that others might not. So I'm able to use that in so many ways to help our initiatives have a greater impact, to share information, and to build a stronger connection with others.
I mean, I can't put it more perfectly. The connection. I mean, really, that's what the true champion is. And really, what's an essential piece of being a BRG member? And your BRG succeeding in embedding DI in your organization. Jamie talked about it right there. Basically, champion to the staff when they come in her unique role as a business partner. She gets to talk to them, onboard them, and also making sure that the leaders, are really part of that process. So really championing DI every step of the way. That's what a true champion looks like. So thank you, Jamie. And Jamie, we'll ask you to just continue along the lines. You belong to 2 BRGs at UNFCU right now, and you are really actively engaged in both, to be honest, leading initiatives. So what would you say is the benefit of being a member of the BRG?
That is a tough question because there are so many. Being in a BRG, there's this camaraderie and community feel to it. Personally, I often refer to the BRGs kind of as extracurricular activities, sort of like being in a club at school. Everyone's there because they want to be, and we share a common interest and purpose. And one of the best things to me are the opportunities it brings. There is literally something for everyone. In the BRGs, there's countless ways to be involved, whether you attend meetings, you show your support at events, you're educating yourself, you're assisting with initiatives, maybe you're planning and facilitating them. You could be administrative support by taking minutes, or maybe you're the treasurer. The list really goes on, and essentially you can choose your path and be as little or as involved as you would like. And Ayanna and Faye also mentioned this. I really enjoy the educational aspect of being in a BRG. There's always something I'm learning that's new on how to be a better advocate, ally, champion. And it's a great way to get to know my colleagues in a different way. So going beyond the surface, being in a BRG presents opportunities to really get to know someone on a different level. One of the activities that I participate in is a support group through the Women's BRG. And it's been amazing to see how the group has grown over the past year. And Faye, you mentioned this, it's created this safe space for us to share openly and honestly. And really in all the BRGs, we learn, share, and celebrate our differences, which brings a deeper understanding of someone and what they value. And of course, we have a lot of fun and laughs along the way.
Excellent. Very important, you said, and I noticed somebody asked a question. Yeah, we do a lot of training and educating in our BRG. In fact, in order to become a leader in the BRG, you have to undergo a training program. We have a BRG leadership training program we put our staff through. And there's a lot of educational opportunities in our BRGs. That's something we do. And, the BRGs are really instrumental in what's important to UNFC. We started with, LGBTQ+, women and multicultural BRGs, and now we have an African-American BRG, all because that's what our staff told us they wanted. We asked the question, and that's what they told us they wanted. So somebody asked these questions, and I'm just responding to them using the examples Jamie gave. So Ayanna, back to you. What would you tell somebody who was considering leading a BRG? If somebody, it's work, we're not going to pretend it's easy. What has been your experience there?
Through my experience, it's definitely understanding that even though you're a leader, you also have to be able to learn as well. Not feeling that it's a dominance, but more so an experience, opportunity for you to learn from the different colleagues, and also delegating. I think that's a huge component into leadership, because it helps to strengthen all of the activities. For example, Jamie mentioned there's treasurers, there's people to learn how to project manage. There's so many different activities that come out of every single initiative that we work on, that you don't want to do everything for yourself. You want to be able to make sure that your team has that opportunity to learn something and to grow. There were examples of individuals from the team that actually got promoted or did some bilateral movements within the organization because of the training that they received, and because of the activities that they actually took part in the BRGs that helped strengthen just their learning capabilities, their resume. They were able to go on into different departments and succeed and carry that on to other colleagues as well, sharing those experiences. So I think giving the opportunity to learn yourself, but also delegation is a huge component to it. And be open to ideas, be open to things that you may not necessarily feel that may work, but give everyone the opportunity to feel empowered.
You're right, Diana. That's one thing we know we've done well at UNFCU, and working in collaboration with our talent management areas. Well, really providing unique opportunities for development for employees. Everybody's not always able to go up the ladder. There's always areas to go laterally, and by giving people these leadership opportunities, helping them to get skills that they wouldn't otherwise get, that's one of the ways our members of the BRGs have benefited. And as a leader, I can truly say that I've seen Diana delegate and really get people involved, in the way they do stuff. So that has been one of the strengths of the BRD leaders, helping people to become leaders. So that's something that's greatly appreciated. So Faye, we're gonna go back to you, and we're going to say that in your role as a sponsor, how do you see the BRGs leading change at the organization?
I think everything we've heard up to now really speaks about that change. And in a nutshell, I think the BRGs have, and the whole DEI program at UNFCU have just really strengthened the organization and strengthened the bond that we all feel towards our brand and our organization, UNFCU. And just to build off of one of the questions in the chat, I mean, we cannot say enough about the role that Carlene has played in really driving the BRGs. And I think it's really critical to have someone like that in an organization who can recognize what individuals can bring to a business resource group, and has the relationship with those individuals to go and approach them. Because one of the things, we recently had a forum within UNFCU where we had the BRG leaders speak about what they have learned. And I think every single person spoke about how they never thought that they would be at the forefront of something or leading something. And it wasn't until Carlene approached them and said, hey, just give it a try, and made it seem that, there was no downside. It was all upside. And these individuals, like Ayana described, all flourished and it just started to see the leadership skills and how well they do and how much passion they have for it. And that development is really a big change, a great way to strengthen UNFCU and the friendships. I think, Ayana, you mentioned that too. I mean, one of the individuals who I had the pleasure of co-leading the Women's BRG is now one of my closest personal friends. And just all the people that I had a chance to meet as a result of this across the organization. So it also brings a lot of visibility at all levels of the organization. And all of these help strengthen the bond that we all feel, which in turn helps retention. And given the work environment that we're in right now, given the job market that we're in right now, retention is really critical. And this is such a nice and authentic way to get employees engaged and help us find ways to support one another. And you mentioned earlier on, Carlene, about the forum that we were able to have about what the events of January 6th here in the United States. Last 18 months have been just very difficult, very divisive time. And even though those things are happening outside of work, it affects your mentality. It affects how you perform within your role. And to have this forum, I mean, we were all feeling so many emotions, and this forum really gave us a way to speak about those emotions in a constructive way. And that not only gave us peace of mind so that we could focus on work more, but also we discussed ways that UNFCU could help support some of the initiatives or ways that we wanted to go about and move forward in the world, not just within UNFCU. So that was a long-winded answer, but it does nothing but strengthen the brand.
Right. But a great answer, because, you know, just even the three of you on the panel here, the strength of the leadership, I say to people, I'm always amazed, you know, at how people have stepped up, people have done the extra. Remember, BRG leadership, even participation in the BRG is voluntary. And for people to be willing to do such a heavy lift to engage is always amazing to me. And then we learn so much more about ourselves. I think about, as you said, during the pandemic, everything went virtual, and that helped us to, you know, really strengthen everything. So it really was a good opportunity. I even think in the pandemic, our BRGs learned. I cannot say enough about how amazing the BRGs were at pivoting and making everything virtual and still keeping the members engaged. So we'll just ask one last question, and briefly from each of you, I'll start with Jamie. In what ways do you see the BRGs impacting UNFCU's DI program in the future? In a minute and under.
Sure. I mean, I think the BRGs will just continue to strengthen the DEI program that we have. You know, DEI really, in my opinion, has become embedded in our culture. And I think that is largely due to the BRG's work. And as Faye mentioned, due to you, Carlene. And I mean, through the BRGs, we'll just continue to build on that strong foundation, ensuring all employees feel welcomed, that their differences are valued and celebrated, and continue to educate staff on these DEI topics. I'm excited to see where it takes us.
Definitely. How about you, Faye?
Well, one of the things we haven't actually mentioned is that the BRGs also take on business issues and come up with solutions for those. So as we continue to expand and as we continue to learn more about challenges outside, we can bring those in and bring solutions to them. And the BRGs have been great at doing that.
Diana?
I see healthy conversations, even if someone agrees or disagrees, they can have healthy discussions and feel great coming out with the outcome of, we can agree to disagree, but also sharing in that idea that you can talk about certain topics at work and don't feel like you have to be mummed or feel like your points don't matter. I think I see that strengthening a lot more. I think I see a lot more of openness and more ability to learn about different cultures, different ways people live, the way we value each other. The strengthening of the brand, I have to say that is a huge thing with us coming together, and retention for sure.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just put in from my own perspective, I basically see us as planting seeds that will germinate way beyond UNFCU. So and my role as a DI officer, what I look forward to doing is saying, hey, we have an opportunity to start with us, be the change we want to see in the world. It's kind of been my motto. So watching all of you, I see you as planting seeds, because they don't just stay within UNFCU. We go out, we do this in our, as Diana said before, we go out and we tell our families and we tell our friends. And so I think it is, organizations tend to think about us doing it in the workplace, but think about the impact way beyond the workplace at this point in time. This is a normal, this is life. DI is life. In the last 18 months, if we've learned nothing, we've learned this is life. We've had such a great impact. So the ability to do that and do it in the workplace where people can learn and bring their authentic selves to the workplace, as Renee talked about, the mindfulness of it all. It's like planting the right seeds, and then each person takes a seed and brings it out. So UNFCU 600 plus employees all going out and seed planting. So I really see a tremendous opportunity there. It is really an open ocean. Tom, I just want to point out.
Yeah, I do want to try to get at least one or two of these questions from the audience in a report, and you have 30 seconds. So did you go through training, and how did you form the BRGs was kind of a theme between, how did you have like the expertise to form the BRGs? I'm just summarizing two questions.
Right. So I guess essentially we do have training. So when we began our BRGs, we invited everybody sort of like to a town hall. so they would know what the BRGs were going to be. We invited them to join. And then we did have training. We have training for the leaders. Anybody who's going to be in a leadership role does go for a training at UNFCU to be able to help them understand the life cycle of a BRG so they know what to look for. So everybody there, would have had that experience. And then formation of the BRGs, as I said before, was largely based on what our staff told us. We put it out there. We asked what they wanted. They told us, and we formed the BRGs based on that. We newly created our African American BRG also. From that, we do an assessment of our organization every 2 years. And in the last assessment, we knew we needed to create an African American BRG. So we recently launched that. And again, people have joined, people are telling us what they want. So a lot of it is listening and paying attention to what people are telling us they need at this time. So hopefully I answered that.
Yeah,
I just want to add to that. Sorry, Tom.
Can we answer it in the chat, because we do have to move on to our next session? But I mean, incredible. I mean, we have 381, I think, people like in 380-ish in the BRGs right now, and it's a real testament to the power. If you guys keep this conversation going, some of those resources, Carleen, I'm going to want them, because I know the community who's watching are going to want to learn from us and what was successful here. So we'll talk about how we're going to share that later in the day. But we're going to switch over. So thank you, panel. Fantastic work. We're going to switch over to a totally different topic in terms of sustainability. We're going to be talking about natural capital. Natural capital are natural assets that account for nature's role in the economy and human well-being. They really help governments think about that, but for businesses, they enable businesses to think about efficiency and sustainability and managing risk in their own operations. And for us, it's important for us to think about how financial institutions can quantify nature's value in our businesses, and in short, how credit unions could be stewards of nature. And so we're very pleased and thrilled and lucky to return to the United Nations sponsor, and for some more insights from Glasgow. Please welcome Dr. Pushpam Kumar, Chief Environmental Economist and Senior Economic Advisor of the UN Environment Program, UNEP, in Washington, D.C. Dr. Kumar leads work on the response to COVID-19, pollution and human capital, nature-based solutions, inclusive wealth, sustainable development goals, and the nature and human development nexus. He's been instrumental in designing and implementing and providing leadership to organizations on the concept of natural capital and its mainstreaming of that concept. Dr. Kumar has a doctoral degree in environmental and ecological economics, and holds a position of honorary research scientist at the Earth Institute at Columbia University here in New York, and is an extraordinary professor at the University of Pretoria. And he's one of the global experts at the Masters Academy of DTAO DTAO Group in Shanghai. His publications include peer-reviewed journals in Science, Bioscience, Ecological Economics, Ambio, Ecosystem Services and International Development, and his op-ed pieces have appeared in The State of the Planet, the Earth Institute in New York, and Down to Earth from India, and the World Economic Forum in Davos. Also, I'd like to welcome Prasad Surapaneni, our SVP and Chief Information Officer at UNFCU and co-executive sponsor of the UN Global Sustainability Program, will facilitate a Q&A session after Dr. Kumar's presentation. So welcome, thrilled to have you, Pushpam.
Thank you. Thanks for all your kind words. And I'm very, very happy to be here because I banked with UNFCU and with all good experience in last 10, 12 years. So I'm very pleased to be with you all. This topic is a slightly different one from what I was listening in the earlier session. The idea is that the way income has grown in last 70 years, let's say since 1950, it has gone up by 15 times, but 3 times population has gone up. I mean, 1950 to 2019 or 20. So in terms of per capita GDP, it has gone by 5 times, which is an impressive achievement. And we have achieved many things, no doubt about it. The life expectancy, the education, health systems. However, all the amassing of public wealth and all kinds of capitals, that is produced or manufactured capital, has been achieved at the cost of natural capital. And what you see and keep hearing, the kind of carbon we are pumping into atmosphere, the way we have destroyed the forest globally. We have eroded the topsoil. Groundwater has been depleted in many parts of the world, not everywhere. Marine and coastal resources are in a very dire situations. You keep hearing that by 2030, you will have more plastics in the ocean than the fish. There are many parts of the world, in sub-Saharan Africa, in South Asia. When I'm speaking and we are talking, I get the news that there is a complete lockdown in Indian capital of New Delhi. And this is not due to COVID-19, but this is due to pollution. Every child, when they go in the morning and by the time they come back, they have taken 50 to 72 cigarettes every day. So that is the level of pollution, PM 2.5 and many others. Now, the question is, what kind of development do we want? What kind of growth do we want? We want growth. Growth is a nice word, and being an economist, I love growth. A plant should grow, an economy should grow, a body should grow. But is this the growth we want, where we can't give a clean air, clear water, and green to our next generations? It may not be the reality in many parts of the world, but it is happening in many parts of the world too. So the idea is that many of these natural resources or natural assets, air, water, surface water, groundwater, both, topsoil, they must be monitored. They are not free gift of nature, since their maintenance require investment, and so they can't be called as free gift of nature. So we should invest in their restoration and in their management. And since they require investment, they are just like any other capitals. Now, so that is what we call it natural capital. Not a new word, but certainly in the UN lexicon, this is a new word, and UN resolution is there now, and they have accepted that natural assets are natural capital, and there is no a priori basis to discriminate natural capital against human or produced capital. Now, with that in background, let me share with you. So this is what I wanted to now. So why we are talking about so when we talk about natural capital, one more thing here. There should not be over-reliance on GDP, as all of you are financial experts. So I don't need to explain this to this audience. There's something called flow, and there's something called stock. GDP, a gross domestic product, which is equated with, in common parlance, as income, is a flow concept. So flow emanates from the stock, that is the wealth. If wealth is sinking or wealth is going down, you have no way to increase income. Maybe in the short run, maybe you can do that by substituting more labor, but eventually the limit would apply. So that's why it is, if you really care about sustainability of the system, durability of the system, and when I say system, I mean economic system of the nations, we must have a balance set. The business firms and the companies are far more smart in this sense because they maintain the balance set. But the nations don't maintain, most of the nations, some do, but most of the nations, they don't maintain the national balance sheet of their wealth. Wealth that is primarily produced capital. Some of produced capital, yes, they do. Human capital, partially. Natural capital, virtually nil. They don't have any idea. And that is the reason that you are depleting the water, you are eroding the soil, you are cutting the forest, we all know that 1 million species are under the risk of extinction. Why these things have happened? Because the way we have treated them. So they are not accounted, they are not priced, and they are not internalized in the economic system. This can be done once we have the wealth and not only produced capital, but inclusive. We call it inclusive or comprehensive wealth. That is what natural capital is couched in. So natural capital is one of the components of the wealth of the nations. Please remember, those of you who have interest, Adam Smith, when he was writing his book around 350 years back, he was not talking about income. He was talking about wealth of the nations. Secondly, when we talk about intergenerational equity, like passing the welfare to the future generation, to our child and grandchild, we can't pass the income. We can pass the wealth only. And precisely for that reason, wealth must be tracked down and measured. Now, why we have to do that? Because conventional measures of progress, whether it is GDP or some other kind of, they have terribly failed. And there is enough science about it. You have economists talking all the time that GDP does not take care of your well-being and sustainability. Some of the work which we did in United Nations Environment Program, this is for 1992 to 2014. You have 3 types of capital: per capita GDP, per capita human capital, per capita natural capital, and per capita inclusive wealth. You will find it obviously GDP is higher than the inclusive wealth per capita expected, but in spite of the per capita human capital going up for this period, and this is for 140 countries of the world, 140 for 25 years of period, natural capital is on decline. If you see this is on the, this is the lower part. You can see that is the only capital, which is on decline. That means there is a trade-off. We are increasing certain types of capital by destroying other types of capital. Is this sustainable? Maybe in the short run, maybe yes. If people have some blind faith in technology and innovation, it can rescue you for some time, but not infinitely. So that's why tracking wealth is important. And when you see this data, who are the top 10 countries in terms of inclusive wealth per capita growth? They are not necessarily the richest country of the world. On the basis of inclusive wealth, some of the richest countries are missing in the top 10. And if you see the bottom list, which is a sad news, some of the so-called rich nations are appearing in that bottom. That means many of those so-called rich countries, going by GDP criteria, are really, they are destroying natural capital and they might be in trouble. Now, this also tells you that, this is on the basis of our latest report, by the way, that many countries are consuming beyond their means. And certainly poor countries are, amongst them. So income is not wealth. So confusing income and wealth is dangerous for sustainability. And by the way, it is also a bad economics. You can't mix income with, see, what is income? Income is that you have initial stock of capital, you add your effort, create flow of services, you add them up at market price or net factor cost, whatever, and that is your income. But treating income as your wealth is bad, or mixing the two is, probably to this audience, again, I'm saying, because you people are far smart than the other guys who have managed natural capital. For you people know the difference very, very well. Now, poorer countries are on an unsustainable path. That is our analysis. It's showing. So, what it requires? It requires restoring natural capital. That is why you might know that UN decades of restoration has been, UN has declared the 10 years from 2021 to 2030 as the even decades of restoration. Why restoration? Because many parts of the world are facing excessive demand for the natural resources, and that is far exceeding the supply of natural resources. So in order to manage this gap, restoration investment is needed. Whether it is soil, you might have heard Great Green Wall Initiative where $14 billion have been allocated, 14 billion. If you see clause 16 of the Glasgow, where, I mean, many people might have different views about Glasgow in terms of its success, but I have been there virtually and many of my colleagues on the spot. This is still something which provides you a good guidance. But this document coming from COP26 in Glasgow last week is very clear about natural capital and natural resources, especially in mitigating and adapting to climate change. So restoration. Second, maintaining natural capital. That is also key to maintaining human well-being and sustainability. And finally, it's not only restoring or maintaining, one has to grow it. How it will grow? There are many ways. I mean, whether it is even decades of restoration, whether it is declaring protected areas, whether it is, you know, in US you have 30 years, 30% of ocean, and it's not only land-based, it's also ocean and marine area, because now the next domain is marine. That is where you are going to sequester your carbon, you are going to maintain your corals, and you are going to harvest lots of precious resources, which is so much needed for sustainability of society. What I will do, since I know I might have said something where people might have questions, I will stop here and would be more, happier to take more questions and comments and then see if any particular area needs to be elaborated. I will be very happy to do that. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for giving us great insight into the importance of natural capital, nature capital. Please ask your questions in the chat. I'm going to start with a question for you, Dr. Kumar. How can financial institutions quantify nature's value in their businesses? In short, how can credit unions be stewards of nature?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. See, there are a lot of things which people have been talking conventionally, like CSR, responsible banking, responsible lending. You see where your money is going, in which sector, how it is impacting natural capital and ecosystems. There have been talk about bringing sovereign wealth fund into the restoration. So there is a range of tools through responsible lending and responsible investment. One can keep track, and there are tools where impact of your investment on natural capital can be quantified and monetized. There are clear ways. Now the question is, who should be internalizing this? Whether the credit union should be internalizing in its operations, or the investor who is going to use that fund. The question is that probably the financial institution has more. I think they might prove more effective, as some of the business firms have shown, or HSBC has done, I think, in a big way. And there are many other banks. I don't want to name anyone here, but there are some examples where impact of their lending has been quantified, monetized, and internalized in the financial models and the lending practices. So it can be done.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a good answer. I know you mentioned HSBC is one of the companies that are valuing the natural capital. Are there any other examples of companies that you can provide us?
Oh, Philips is one. Price, then I think few fashion industry in Rome. I mean, this number is growing every day. So it is Philips, Nokia. These guys have gone ahead in a big way, and they're analyzing that how at every stage of their life cycle of the product, it is going to impact air, water, and soil. And they have done a wonderful analysis, and they are quantifying. And you will be pleased to know that except in 1 or 2 cases, I mean, right now there are 146 big corporations who are heavily into this. So coming back to this, except 1 or 2 cases, in most cases, they have found that it is win-win. There are some cases where you have hard trade-offs, but in most cases, it is win-win. Means they have improved their productivity, their share market, the prices have gone up. There is a wonderful goodwill for the company. At least in Europe, it has happened, and I don't see, even in US, it is happening, but I don't see why it should not happen in this part of the world. And in Africa also, I think, Kenya has banned plastic. And in fact, now I'm here and I feel guilty every time when I go to the shop, so much of plastics. So there are plenty of good examples and practices from business firms to the financial institutions where sustainability element has been internalized. And there is a clear-cut rules and process how to do that.
Oh, that's nice. At least there is some hope. Some companies are doing well. I have a very good question from Patrick Seiler in the chat. Yes, some of our sustainability goals are somewhat at odds with each other. For example, some renewable energy products like solar panels and electric vehicles require the extraction of natural resources like rare earth minerals. How do we balance these competing interests?
That's a very good question and probably hard to answer. But going to sustainable development goal, if the reference is to sustainable development goals by sustainability goals, see, whether it is SDG, Glasgow, and Paris, or Kunming for biodiversity, we need to understand this is a political forum where you have 200 countries and primarily head of states and the ministers coming and negotiating. Now, they may not be as refined as you or me would like to be. The reason is that 200 countries, 7 billion plus people, different expectations, aspirations, and ambitions. You should not expect that they will be a very well-defined, sanitized goals and flagging of trade-offs and synergy. That is not the purpose. Their purpose is to give us the lamp post that look, in this direction we have to move. Now, the rest is whether it is indicators, the baseline, the goals, the targets, that work is still moving ahead. Now, it is true, you are right, that even in SDG, there are some trade-offs. But the beauty of the SDG this time, unlike MDG, is that people are considering, on the head of states have agreed, that the health of planet and people are interlinked. They are not separate, which was not in MDG, by the way. Second, they are also saying it is not only that, MDG was thought, oh, this is something for the southern countries. This time, it is for everyone. So integration for everyone, inclusion is there. Now it is true. If SDG 3, the health, and if you see SDG 15, you can find some trade-offs. But this trade-off is appearing because many of the side effects have not been internalized. If those side effects are internalized and a proper comprehensive cost benefit is done, and if there is a mechanism to reflect it in the market rate of interest, then investment will move accordingly, and that trade-off will disappear. Going back to your specific examples. You were saying that renewable energy products like solar panels and electric vehicles require the extraction of natural resources like rare earth minerals. Yes, but you have to see that which one yield the better results. Some extraction, of course, you can't avoid, but it will really improve many things like solar panels and electric EVs. That is why, you know, Tesla and other companies, I mean, Tesla is one, but other companies are moving in the same direction. Sooner or later, they have to move. I mean, we have no alternatives unless somebody blocks the eyes. We have, the writing is, I mean, and only thing is that you have to elongate your roles and see beyond yourself, and which is not difficult to do. After all, you may be an investor. You may be a company, the managing director, but you are also father, husband, brother, sister, mother. And if you avoid the dual paradox that as an individual, you think differently, as a social animal, you think differently, that needs to be conversed. And I think many of these trade-offs will disappear. By no means I want to say there won't be trade-off. There would be some trade-off. Who says it? But we have to organize and resolve it. It can be done. But this example is a good example. But I think one has to see the time element and a space where it happens, who is the loser, who is the gainer, and it can be resolved.
Oh, thank you so much. I know life is a trade-off. Great insights. Thanks again for your great insights. And also thank you for being a credit union member. Appreciate it. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you. Really fascinating conversation. And I could even see that through line. We were talking about inclusion, we were talking about inclusive wealth into natural capital. And now we're moving into how, and we learned yesterday that various communities are impacted differently by some of these impacts of climate change. So this like through line of what total sustainability means is just going throughout this conference for the last 2 days. And with that, I'm really thankful to you, Dr. Kumar and Prasad, for leading this conversation. I'm turning over now to have the pleasure of welcoming Pablo Di Filippi, our Senior Vice President of Membership and Networking at Inclusive. Inclusive is hosting this segment on the stories of the climate crisis resilience with credit unions from Louisiana, California, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. Many are familiar with Inclusive's great work to serve community development credit unions nationwide. And for his part, Pablo leads Inclusive's membership and development engagement strategies. He manages Inclusive Network, a network of community development finance practitioners who provide valuable consulting services to CDCUs. He has more than 20 years of experience in community finance and regulated financial institutions and domestic and international arena. He's originally from Chile, and Pablo has come to the US in the early 90s and almost immediately became involved with credit unions, which I love to hear. Same for me also, Pablo. And after working at MCU, a large credit union serving New York City, he joined Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union, a credit union serving that population in New York City, and served as its CEO, and has managed the World Council of Credit Unions International Remittance Program. Mr. Di Filippi holds a BA in Social Studies from the Universidad de Chile, and as well as a professional accounting certificates from Baruch College and NYU. And he has a master's in business administration from Pace University. So lots of expertise he's bringing to this table in this conversation. Thank you for hosting this incredible panel. Pablo, I turn it over to you.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for the opportunity. Really fantastic conversation yesterday and today. Clearly, this is such a pressing situation for all of us, and it has an impact on not only on credit unions, but also on the members and communities we serve. So I appreciate the opportunity. I'm actually honored to be part of this conversation with this amazing set of panelists that we have here who have gone through these experiences themselves. You know, we started thinking about who could actually share some of these perspectives in terms of climate change impact on credit unions operations. And we didn't have to think hard to find, you know, great examples. And it's not just about one location, one geography. You know, these issues are affecting, you know, credit unions all over the country, all over the world, and communities, of course, that they serve. So what I would like to do is to just quickly introduce my panelists here. I'm not going to go through that lengthy bio that everyone has, but I just want to say that everyone here runs a CDF5 credit union, and that's important because I wanted to make sure that we could actually help make connections between sustainability, climate change, and community development. All these issues intersect, right? And for our membership, our members, CDF5 credit unions and credit unions that are serving low-income and minority populations, which, by the way, have been even more impacted than the rest of the population by climate change, you know, this is a big imperative for our network. So really quickly, I'm going to introduce Shasta Leninger. She's the Vice President of Digital Experience for PATH Federal Credit Union in New Orleans. This credit union used to be known as ASI FCU, and they have a lengthy story actually of responding to natural disasters. They played an incredible role after Katrina many years ago, and they continue that tradition of being first responders, you know, when disaster strikes. Then Monica Bells, she's the CEO of Kauai Government Employees FCU in Hawaii. Monica is also an amazing force of nature. She has built the credit union into a really powerhouse in terms of community development. They have also had a fair share of, you know, close encounters with natural disasters, and I understand that Monica has been not only there helping the credit union respond to that, but she herself has done some of this work even in jet skis or something like that, right? Monica, you'll probably tell us about that. Aurelio Arroyo, CEO of Jesus Obrero, Cooperativa Jesus Obrero in Puerto Rico, another incredible leader with a lot of innovation, someone who has really pioneered the adoption of clean energy, solar financing in Puerto Rico, someone who has, you know, with his colleagues in the island also gone through this, you know, huge, massive hurricane 3 years ago, Maria, someone who's also like Shasta on the inclusive board. So welcome, Aurelio, and looking forward to learning from you. And finally, but not last, Bryce Yocum, who runs a credit union in California, a CDF5 as well, also Juntos Avanzamos designated, which is, you know, important because when we talk about minority communities, again, these are the communities that are getting impacted, you know, even more by natural disasters. Bryce is in a place where water conservation has become a critical element, right? So he's really thinking ahead in terms of how can he respond and prepare for what's coming to where he operates in California. So with that, we're gonna start the conversation. So welcome everyone. So the first question is, number one, of course, is what climate impact have you experienced in your region, and how did you get through those situations? So let's start with Monica, Shasta, Aurelio, and then Bryce.
Thank you, Pablo, and aloha from Kauai. So Kauai in general, we're a group of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, so we're quite vulnerable to a lot of natural disasters. We had a Category 5 hurricane back in the early 90s. I wasn't here for it, but everybody still talks about it to this day. It transformed the way that the island operates and thinks and connects and survives. I was, however, here in 2018 when we had historical flooding. So Kauai actually broke the record, the national record for rainfall in 24 hours. We had a fluke thunderstorm, wasn't expected, and it just stopped on the North Shore, and it dropped just under 50 inches of rain. It's like 49.5 inches of rain in 24 hours. And we basically just woke up to 2 towns completely submerged underwater. And, you know, it was a community response. It's, you know, so often I talk through the story and it's about like how the credit union responded, but it's more about how Kauai responded. And we are Kauai. We are part of Kauai. We're owned by Kauai. We're very much integrated into the community. Then COVID hit. And last March, if you see behind me here, we had another huge record rainfall hit, and it caused this landslide behind me. And this road right here is the road down into Hanalei. So my children and the school is on one side of that road, and the rest of the community was on the other side of the road. So that's been pretty devastating. And we've spent the last 3 years rebuilding roads and trying to control the landslides. So it's getting worse every year. So those are some big issues. We haven't had a huge hurricane, knock on wood, since the early 90s. So everyone says we're overdue for one. I'm not looking forward to that, but we're certainly preparing for it.
Thank you, Monica. Shasta.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, so I am from our headquarters are near New Orleans. We are in Southeast Louisiana. So we are prone to flooding. New Orleans is actually below sea level, and hurricanes. So we have yearly hurricanes. The most recent disaster that we went through as a credit union is Hurricane Ida. And so we had significant damage to at least one of our branches, and many of our employees, their homes were destroyed, their roofs were damaged. We still have employees who were displaced. So the biggest thing is, how do we get through the crisis? And for us, it's a shift from disaster recovery to business continuity. And how do we continue to serve our members when they are evacuating from a crisis? How do we serve our employees? And we do that by planning, communication, and just having a really close relationship with our vendors to keep our systems going. So it's a yearly thing that we experience. We learn every year. We get better at planning and just putting the pieces in place that we can continue to serve our members. It's so vital that they continue to have access to their money during a crisis, and even after that, we can provide the funds through government funding and resources that they have access to that. So it is a critical role that we play as well in our communities in time of disasters.
Thank you, Shasta. And we're going to talk more about preparation and readiness, because you're right. I mean, we are, financial first responders, but for that to happen, we have to be ready.
That's right.
Aurelio, your turn now.
Thank you, Pablo. Hi, everyone. It's a great honor to be part of this excellent summit and excellent meeting. It's my third participation. It was a truly honor to be part, and the second as a panelist. As Pablo mentioned, Puerto Rico has experienced a great impact from natural phenomenon. We prefer to call natural phenomenon instead of natural disaster, because I consider that the disaster is the humans that impact the environment and provoke the worst phase that we saw in 2017 as when Hurricane Maria struck the island. We lost our power. It was the biggest blackout in the U.S. history. Some parts of the island suffered 9 months without power. Imagine to live 1 week without power, 9 months without power is almost incredible. It demonstrates the resilience and the ability of the Puerto Ricans to overcome all those disasters that we have been exposed, because we live in the road of the hurricane. We live in the middle of the tropical, as Monica expressed, with a different ocean, in the same latitude but a different ocean. And also, since we have, since we understand our important role as community critical infrastructure that cooperativas, credit unions are in the island, is very important for us to have the ability to overcome and to start operating as soon as it could be safe. Remember, in 2017, we suffered not only a power blackout, a telecommunication blackout. We suffered almost all the island in terms of telecommunication, without access of internet or access to any kind of electronic service. We suffer water outage. We suffer, we lost the closure of our seaport. Remember, Puerto Rico is an island in the Caribbean, and 90% of the import, we depend 90% of the import for our supplies, to supply the island. And we lost the main airport. We lost the radars of the main airport. There is no air traffic to receive or to go out to the island in this period. So we have total incommunication. And in this process, almost 90% of cooperativas in the island start operating 48 hours after the impact of the worst hurricane in the history of Puerto Rico in 100 years. So why we have that kind of response to the worst scenario is because we are part of the community. We have a huge responsibility with our members. We have a great business continuity plan because we consider ourselves vulnerable, and that's why we start operating. That's our main impact in these 4 years, on these years and recent years.
Thank you, Aurelio. So two things. I mean, we are local, right? So we can just, close down and wait. We live in these communities, right? So we have no option. We have to respond. The second piece here is that we don't live in a microcosmos, right? So you were talking about infrastructure, and that actually leads us into the conversation with Bryce now, because I think that part of this is not just to be ready to respond, but also to be prepared to kind of operate almost, independently from any grids or any water supply. So Bryce, I'm really fascinated with what you did with your new building, your new headquarters. Tell us about why. Why did you do that?
Thanks, Pablo. I wasn't really ready to present. I thought that your CV was the presentation. That felt like that was enough for everybody to hear. But no, I appreciate that question. And I think there's both answers to why we did it and that we thought about in the beginning, and then answers that we're kind of coming up with as we go. And Pablo's just referring to sort of the sustainable building that we did, which probably isn't that remarkable amongst this group of people, but in our part of the Central Valley of Central California, this LEED building we did with its solar panel and water reduction and all that is really kind of one of a kind. We did it in the beginning for stewardship reasons, because we are our members and our members are us, and we wanted to spend our members' money well, and we were replacing buildings, and so we wanted to reduce our operation costs. We wanted to reduce our impact. But we also have a value here at Tacomas about sweeping our own doorstep, and so we wanted to be the change that we were hoping for. And then I think it's also becoming this idea of normalizing that change. How do we create a climate where doing this isn't that unique and isn't that interesting? And so we have to be leaders in normalizing some of these sustainable changes. And I think what we're finding, as opposed to some of the other panelists, our climate event is both natural and man-made here in California. And what's happening with water around us, the implications of living in a place that goes through drought, that then experiences fire, which causes a lack of vegetation, that then gets washed out in the next rainy season, that it's just this cycle. And unfortunately, where we are, the predominant driver of employment is agriculture. And rather than using water-saving technologies to reduce our impact, we use it to spread our impact into even more unsustainable ways, unfortunately. The long-term effects that could have as that system crashes on communities of color is just something we aren't even prepared for yet. And so trying to think about those things, these are all sort of linked to these small steps we're taking as a credit union.
Thank you, Bryce. And yes, how do we, become stewards of our members' money, but at the same time, how do we prepare ourselves for something that will happen again? You talked about the cycle, and that's what we're seeing in New Orleans over and over, and probably in Puerto Rico as well, right? So what can you panelists share in terms of what happens next? How do we get ready for the next big one, because there will be one, probably next year again. So Monica, let's start with you. What are you doing to proactively prepare for what's coming?
Sure, thanks, Pablo. So to just kind of piggyback on your comment earlier about the jet skis. So
You're
when we had
more
our,
jet skis?
yeah, actually, yes. So when we had our, so we have one road on Kauai, and it just goes around. It doesn't go all the way around. It stops in this big mountain range, and it's lined on the ocean with lots of cliffs in some areas, especially on the North Shore. So what we experienced is we weren't able to reach. Many people were completely cut off from medical aid services, essential services of any kind. So the primary mode of transportation was Zodiac's, jet skis, and little mini boats. And it was pretty incredible to see, new supply chains basically form overnight with those. And so, yeah, we at one point, I put the credit union in a dry bag on my backpack and jumped on a jet ski and was able to go deploy pop-up centers or remote locations to help serve emergency loans and water and medicine and whatever we could possibly deliver. So overall, I think our island just took a big step back after that. And we're working hand in hand with all of the community stakeholders right now on several projects. One of them we're helping to fund is a giant climate resiliency center on the North Shore, particularly the most vulnerable location. It will probably include somewhere in between $8 to $15 million of funding. So we're trying to partner with USDA and pull in experts to help fund the project, and we'll certainly participate as well. And we're forming that committee, building hurricane shelters. We actually don't have any hurricane shelters on Kauai. We're going to build an emergency management center in that location and just bolster our resilience in the most vulnerable region. We also have pop-up branches that we've pretty much got dialed now. Like we have these robust gear that we can put everything in. And after this landslide that you see here, we helped build these new supply chains down on the river. We're boating across, and we built pop-up branches to serve the people in the remote regions. And we basically operate 2 days a week in some of these locations because they're still cut off. They're still doing construction on the road. So it's just kind of a way to adapt. We all are adapting together, and we're constantly thinking, not just, emergency loans were fantastic. Those were great, but also infrastructure, long-term infrastructure. And if funding is a hurdle, or if there are hurdles in our community to build more resiliency, then we really feel that we can find the solution to that, or we can be a part of the solution to that. We're on the fire department board, the Ocean Safety Bureau boards. We've relaunched the CERT teams. We've got tons of water pumps and generators that we have ready to go when the next disaster strikes, and it does, and it quite often. And we've got supply chains ready to go and the communication centers ready to go. So it's pretty much like we all know it's coming. And when it does, we are immediate. And so the credit union is kind of this arm, this natural extension of the emergency response of the island.
That's such a great point, Monica. Coordination. I think that we tend to not to do this work before disaster strikes and people are scrambling to connect, right? And it's too late at that point. So having that plan, prior to anything is really important. Shasta, what's your kind of wisdom here in terms of, getting ready for the next one?
Yeah, so one thing that we have done, I'll refer back to Ida since that's the most recent storm that we have been through, is we poised our call center. So we just upgraded our phone system so that we could work remotely. Before we were really, even through the pandemic, we were really kind of tied to a physical location where our agents had to be in the office. So we upgraded our phone system. So we actually had employees scattered throughout, when they evacuated, they were in hotel rooms and family and friends and wherever, but they were able to get onto the phones and answer over 6,000 phone calls within a couple of days. So that is one major step that we did to be proactive to tackle the situation. We know we have to pivot. We have to pivot our operations, and we have to set ourselves up so that we can work remotely despite, you know, whatever comes our way. So that was really something that that we improved upon for our disaster, and we saw it come to fruition during Hurricane Ida. Well, one of the things that I take away was access to fuel supplies. So when the hurricane hit, after the storm, there was a shortage of gas in the area. Everybody was trying to get fuel, and so we needed that to get to our employees so they can come back to work. We needed gas to fuel our generators. And so I think, you know, just this conversation is so timely. Our dependence, you know, in South Louisiana on fuel, how can we be proactive and look at other resources? Because we were dependent on that. We had to get other credit unions, you know, drove in from Florida and gave us, you know, gas and generators, and we had to drive 2 miles to get access to that. So that was a big realization. That is something that we are focusing on for the future, is looking for other resources and alternatives, that we don't have to be so dependent on just our resources here when those resources are very scarce during times of disaster. So we've learned a lot, and we continue to use that to better our disaster and business continuity plan.
Yeah, Shasta, and that point about fuel supply, you know, is so connected with, you know, what we're seeing all with the supply chain, you know, right now with, you know, the pandemic. But that's something that is absolutely exacerbated when you have a situation like this where, you know, roads are totally shut down, you know, so how do you have access? Even if you have the generators, you know, you cannot operate them, you know, because you don't have the fuel. Aurelio, your turn.
The first lesson that we learned about with the hurricanes, that the people need us, and so we need to provide a stable infrastructure to respond to the needs after hurricane or after a natural phenomenon. We had in that moment 1 generator. Today we have 2 generators. We have since 2015 a solar panel system that provides all the energy, or 85% of the energy that we need to operate. And we have the main grid. So we have four right now. We have 4 energy sources. We are looking for the 5th energy sources with a backup the battery backup for our data center and ATM on premises to provide the service, the immediate service that the people needs after a natural phenomenon. Also, we have, this is in terms of infrastructure, but we have also preparation in terms of the human impact in our community. First of all, is education to our staff, to our voluntary leadership, our members, our board members and committee members, that start with the preparation, the family emergency plan preparation. If there are not plans for the family emergency plans that we have in place, we had problem to start operating because we need our staff, we need our members, we need our boards and committee members supporting our job with the community, because everybody has scarcity during an emergency like a hurricane or other kind of emergency that we are exposed in the island. And also we have both. We have the infrastructure, but we are in place another education and preparation, a culture of prevention, a culture of awareness about the emergency could impact us and could impact our family, our community environment.
Thank you, Aurelio. That's great. So education is a really important point, and we need to wrap up. But Bryce, if you can share, you know, a few thoughts in this conversation, please.
Thanks, Pablo. I'll just say, I think there's, and we talked about this earlier, I think it was Ayana in an earlier presentation talking about continuing to learn. what we think solutions are today, we don't want to get too hard and fast in those. And so we are still learning a lot about what the future implications will be. As I've said, thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just within our institution, but within our community, and how the impacts of climate change will affect people differently. We're trying to gather that information, educate, create services, loans, someone asked about, to help build that resiliency. But I think the biggest thing that I can say is we're still learning a lot and looking forward to collaborating with other credit unions in this area to try to solve some of these problems that are coming but are not yet here.
Thank you, Bryce. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I mean, this could be a whole day conversation in terms of, sharing experiences and learnings. So take, call to action. Everyone, you should, make sure that you are connecting with your peers here, not only in this call, but, United in Sustainability is a great platform. Make sure that you connect with our Clean Energy Center. That's an important tool. Again, if we're talking about, adoption of solar energy, as a way to back up your own operation, but also to help your credit become more, your community become more sustainable. Clean energy is a great way to do that. And with that, I'm going to give it back to you, Tom. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks everyone for giving us this time to share and learn from each other.
Pablo, I'm going to steal some time for myself because you're right that we are going to talk a little bit about UIS Network and the platform it provides. We're trying to hope it provides. But I do want to ask, there was one question that maybe one of the panelists can respond. Have any of you been able to offer consumer commercial loan products to finance resilience projects? Is there anyone that has like a quick answer to that wants to respond to that?
Sure, I'll just really quickly say, check out USDA Community Facilities Loan Program. And there's a lot of credit unions and CUSOs that can lead those if you want to just bring them into your community. But if you Google USDA Community Facilities Program, you can read more about it.
That's a great point, Monica. We have been talking to USDA about financing in rural communities. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you. Amazing, always inspiring panel. And as you were mentioning, Pablo, that this is a great, one of the things we really were trying to do here at UIS is create a platform for us to share these stories and share best practices. And that's really where we're going to go next. So we really want to talk a little bit, and I'm going to try, Pablo, just see if I can share my my screen here. Hopefully that is appearing now and people can see the slide here. We're going to talk a little bit about where we're going as a network and hopefully get some feedback for you, at least give you a little peek into the work we've been doing and get some feedback from the audience on, hey, right direction and how this can be where we take this network going forward. We're really interested in making this a valuable tool and community for the entire credit union industry. I'm going to be joined by my colleagues, Patrick Seiler, Associate General Counsel at UNFCU, and Liz Philippe, Senior Manager of Business Development. And we're going to talk and media relations at UNFCU. Welcome, Patrick and Liz. Over the last, just a quick, really going to do this as fast as we can, just a quick reminder of what we've thought about UIS, something that's credit union centered, focused on community leadership, where collaboration really amplifies our impact as a credit union industry. These have been our pillars. And even at our last summit, we asked you, the audience, what do you want from UIS, right? Where can we have value? And what we heard was you wanted something that had perceivable and specific value to credit unions and was not duplicative or competitive with other resources, either in sustainability or DEI or any of these other resources that are out there. And what we consolidated your feedback into were 3 specific working groups. One was sustainability roadmap tools, really creating a path or tooling to help credit unions along on their sustainability journey. The second was collective impact reporting, because we know credit unions are various, have varying size, but maybe have greater impact when we operate cooperatively and just influencing the entire credit union industry. So we're going to spend just a few minutes updating where we were and what we accomplished, and then show you this new tool that hopefully helps bring together some of these concepts and becomes a resource that can be useful to the credit union industry. So just to get started, on the roadmap tools, we realized that credit unions across this journey probably are not only at different places, some may not know where to start. Renee this morning said something about, hey, if you're doing it, if your first step is just a check mark, that's a first step, right? And sometimes even just taking that first step though is hard, right? We wanted to create a kind of a path that would help credit unions figure out where they were and how to find resources that would help them achieve their goal in their sustainability journey, and create a curated examples and tools and references that credit unions can go to. That was the working group I was working on. I'm going to turn over to Patrick, talk a little bit about collective impact reporting.
Yeah, so we've been looking at, as Tom said, how best to aggregate the efforts that individual credit unions are making and pool them together across this network so that we can see what is the network's impact on the on an industry level on these sustainability measures. So we started trying to target feasible measures, things that would be achievable to scale up, roll out across the entire network, that where we could either direct network members to a resource that they could use so that when they're measuring a particular sustainability metric, they're doing it in the same way as other members of the network so that we can pool these things together. We picked a couple of topics that seemed like ripe fruit. Paper reduction. UNFCU's made some strides and we're looking at automating our process. We would hope to be able to share that tool across the network once we have it ready. Then on the question of sustainable investments, what the right metrics are to measure an individual credit union's sustainable investments. And then we're looking at a couple different measures on the DEI space, how to measure this somewhat intangible question of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what we've been working on.
And Liz, I'm gonna turn it over to you on influencing the credit union industry.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. Advocacy is an integral part of the United Sustainability Network, and it ensures the growth of our movement and our ability to connect with peers, all of you, with regulators and our vendors. And let's not forget about the media, and they have also continued to tell the network story with great enthusiasm. So as communicators, our team, call us evangelists of the network, we seek really to build this positive, inspirational change, and using key content provided by both Tom's and Patrick's working groups. And this includes the metrics that Patrick just spoke to that talk about our collective impact. So it's a choir of voices that are approaching suppliers and not a couple of credit unions doing their own wonderful work, but together we make a huge difference. So as industry influencers, we aim to establish the business and the social responsibility case for credit unions, and to share this timely set of resources that are incubated and curated by the network. And as you can see by today's summit, the network includes Inclusive and UIS Federal Credit Union, as well as many of you who have been great supporters and champions of our movement. In addition, UNFCU's Global Sustainability Program has outreach to credit union leagues and associations, with speakers, with data, and our impact report. And this is to spread the network's good word about sustainability. It drives operational efficiencies, member and staff engagement. So here's where I make our working groups pitch to each of you. If your state or Canadian province, league or association would like to learn more about sustainability, please, we welcome your feedback and are happy to share all of our news, invite representatives and yourselves to our working calls, our quarterly ones, and you'll be hearing more about those. And they can contact us directly at info@uisnetwork.org. Tom, back over to you.
I believe we're on LinkedIn too, right?
We are.
Yes, that's true. Yep. In addition, social media plays a big role.
So
thank you.
One of the absolutely that community interaction. That's something we really want to kind of carry forward, that we capture in this bottle of this summit, how do we kind of keep that going throughout the year, right? And one of the things we were working on, and which we're going to try to show you today, is something we really want your feedback on. We're soft launching this to you guys so that you guys can look at it and let us know, like, yeah, that actually is helpful, or it would be more helpful if it evolved. And that is our new uisnetwork.org website. And we want to preview that to you and what we were hearing and how we took what you guys said and try to turn it into something that was tangible. So first, if you come to uisnetwork.org, you get our homepage here, a reminder of what we are. But one of the things, just quickly to show you, to articulate, we really wanted to help credit unions get started. So knowing where they are is the first step in the journey. It's so funny that I swear Renee and I didn't work on that at all, right? But, and what we realized is that credit unions can be in different phases. It's very similar to a customer journey if you're on the kind of the marketing side, right? Where they're early, they just might be trying to build momentum, or maybe they're getting a little, they have some goodwill, but they really want to kind of make a strong business case. Or really they're at the phase where they're trying to have real organizational commitment. But then maybe they've gotten that commitment and they want to actually integrate, and maybe they're even beyond that, and they're at a point where they really want to influence the industry and have real advocacy. So what we built was broke down, we collected as much as we could from you guys and from other places, resources that would help a credit union if they could figure out if this feels about, they could figure out where they feel they are in their journey. They can kind of find resources. Let's say they're in this engagement phase here and they think like, hey, yeah, we're there. We just don't know how to do, how do we make this real in our company or credit company, in our credit union? We help them find resources that, that you guys collect us. Maybe it's Inclusive Center for Resiliency and Clean Energy, and we'll, help them, take them there. Hopefully I fix that link there, right? But that's, we'll take them to other tools that will take them to those resources. So that's one of the things we were working on. Also, again, you can also search for tools like that if you were interested in it. So I should probably have a little bit of this, right? So maybe some resources or credit union diversity self-assessment. This was something we found that was very interesting and cool, that we thought maybe would be useful to other credit unions. And so that's what we were building here. And of course we want to highlight credit union stories, right? Center for Responsible Lending are also a great place where if we have artifacts that we want to share and make sort of open source to the community, we have links back to all of our sustainability reports, work that is being done by our partners here. This is a blog post that OAS had last year. So what we want to do is kind of curate and collect more and more of this. So just jump back into the presentation for a second. We really want to know, are we on the right track? Would these tools be helpful? Would you share them with your peers? Also, would you contribute to this conversation if you had things you wanted to share? If there were links or resources that you wanted to introduce in the credit union industry, and would you join the conversation? So we have about 5 minutes. I don't know if anyone has any questions and initial impact. If not, we'll share the link with you all, and into the chat, so you guys can kind of poke around it. Obviously it's very new. You're kind of like on the inside here, but we'll kind of open it up. We actually have a few minutes. Anyone have any initial thoughts on the right track, wrong track? Please put it into the chat. Let us know. Does that summarize anyone who gave us feedback last year? Does that summarize any of what you guys were hoping to hear from or see from UNFC, from the United Sustainability Network? All right. So if no, we're going to ask you guys, please keep the 7th of December on your calendars free. We're going to be sending out an invitation here to join our network call, and actually hopefully you'll have a little bit more time.
Tom, can I suggest that also as you think about 2022, we think about creating, one event a year is never enough, for this type of issues. I think that it would be important to have different touch points throughout the year Again, I offer our annual conference as a place where we could do some of that. There's also GAC coming up. So let's be creative about creating a whole track that goes throughout the year in terms of making sure that we have a platform to reconvene and share what we're doing.
Pablo, I think that's one of the most, I think you nailed one of our concepts of that collaboration amplifying impact, right? Like we can coordinate and collaborate. I think, we don't want to have these lulls and the spikes and then lulls and spikes. That's not probably sustainable in terms of developing this. I think that is something we really would love to do. I mean, I think if we can, on our network call, let's maybe start planning out what a calendar looks like and where we can. I know that was something we heard a lot of feedback on about, like kind of continuing the story. Of course, bringing more. We partner very closely with OAS FCU. More and more credit unions who probably can contribute, or we had to figure out how we coordinate that so that we can take advantage of all of our shared resources to do something like that. And Karen, I think if that's a good feedback, whether it is based on topic, we kind of thought about it in a few different ways. Like, do we want to lead with topics? There are different categories, in the tool that you can look at, but if that's, hey, it'd be more interesting if we could, we kind of looked at different areas, the different type of resource, whether it is, what kind of resource it was, where the source was, different phases, take a look around, right? It's very early. We're still trying to figure out how we can be a useful and create a useful tool for the credit union industry, and really more importantly, a useful community in the credit union industry around these important topics. So thank you for that feedback. Definitely open to the hearing almost like your focus group style responses to us.
Yes.
So we can actually create something that is meaningful and has meaningful impact.
Yeah, in addition to the invitation to the network call that Tom already mentioned, and an invitation to get on the LinkedIn and join us on social media, which Liz mentioned, I'd just say we haven't had a robust discussion yet about the future of these working groups, but I expect these groups or something like them will almost certainly continue into 2022, and we would really benefit from the input of more members of the network in our regular working groups. So if you are interested in any of these subjects that are coming up and want to be able to provide input more in real time as we're putting these things together, please do let us know that you're interested, and we'll be happy to share the schedule with which these working groups are meeting, and gather your input as the year goes on rather than all at once at a big meeting like this one.
Fantastic, everybody. Thank you for that feedback. Please, keep that, keep the email, the website, and look out for the next network call. And with that, I think we will turn. Speaking of advocacy, and let me stop sharing my screen here. Sorry about that. Meeting coordinator. So with that, speaking of advocacy and policy, we're now going to hear from people who really have their fingers on the pulse of legislation. We're welcoming Jeremy Liskar, the legislative coordinator of policy at Al Gore's movement, the Climate Reality Project. Jeremy will lead our next discussion on finding solutions and what's new in climate policy, community engagement, and advocacy. Based in Washington, D.C., Jeremy helps lead Climate Reality's federal advocacy campaign called Our Climate Moment. Before joining Climate Reality, Jeremy organized for the Sunrise Movement, leading successful fossil fuel divestment campaign on his college campus. He helped elect climate champions and does what's necessary to create the conditions for winning on climate action and justice. Really impressive, Jeremy. Over to you.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here with you all today, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Our panel is Finding Solutions, What is New in Climate Policy, Community Engagement, and Advocacy. And I'm really excited about the panel of climate action leaders that we have here today. So I'll introduce everybody really quick. We'll begin with Neda Arabshahi. Neda is the director of the Inclusive Center for Resiliency and Clean Energy, which works with credit unions across the United States. In this capacity, she is working to build a network of credit unions committed to designing and scaling solutions to climate change with a goal of promoting affordable and sustainable energy for all people. Neda has over 17 years experience in the clean energy and sustainability space. Most recently, she served as COO at the energy startups Radiator Labs and Block Power, where she helps to create financing and access to clean energy and energy efficiency retrofits for low and moderate income building owners. Prior to those roles, she led the energy program at the Clinton Global Initiative, partnering with public and private sector members to build commitments to low carbon energy solutions, including developing resilient electricity grids and solar workforce development. Neda holds dual MBA and Master of Environmental Science degrees from Yale University, where her research focused on the economic development benefits of renewable energy projects in low-income communities. We also have Todd Fernandez, who's the founder of Climate Crisis Policy, which created a digest of over 700 climate solutions from over 170 expert reports and laws, largely incorporated into the US House of Representatives Climate Crisis Select Committee report. Previously, he served as general counsel and legislative director for the Massachusetts Office of Economic Affairs and as the governor's ombudsman. He has a Master's of Law in Human Rights and Democracy from the University of Pretoria, South Africa, and spent several months at the UN in Ethiopia, where he presented on the topic of elected attorneys general in African democracies. He works with many climate coalitions and leads a grassroots network active in 100 congressional districts in 28 states. He has led efforts for the Off Fossil Fuels Act, the Brownfields Revitalization Act, the LGBT Equality Act, and he has been arrested through civil disobedience several times with New York Renews and Extinction Rebellion. He's determined to outlaw greenhouse gas pollution and fossil fuels via vanguard legislation called the Earth Bill. And we have Jeffrey Stoyer, who is a climate reality leader based in Madison, Wisconsin, a scientist emeritus with the US Geological Survey water resources discipline. Jeff's career has been dedicated to research and gathering intelligence. He served as a hydrologist for the US Geological Survey in the state of Wisconsin before retiring as a principal at High End Consulting. Jeff has published numerous research papers on a range of climate issues. These include toxic contaminant transport in surface waters, urban storm water pollution, rainfall runoff modeling, and hydrology stream ecology interaction, just to name a few. He also served as a navigator and intelligence officer in the US Coast Guard. We'll learn more about Jeff's passion for raising awareness about the truth of climate change during our discussion. So let's get to it. Well, the first question we'll start with is about the work that all of you do in each of your respective areas. Advocacy comes in many forms, especially for an issue like climate change that touches every sector of the economy and every part of our lives. So how do you and your organizations choose to approach climate advocacy? And we'll start with Jeff.
Yes, first slide. So during the introduction, it was mentioned that I'm a volunteer for Climate Reality, but I'm a concerned citizen, a volunteer. I'm not an expert in climate change, but as part of being a volunteer with Climate Reality, my motivation was really for the next slide, please. Was getting involved was for the next generation. This is a shot of my family, and so one of my motivations to getting involved was for the next generation, because much of the burden is going to be for them. And another motivation was for me to learn from the audience. And the approach, the training that Climate Reality did, I received presentations from Vice President Gore, and there were question and answer sessions with the experts, and fantastic panel discussions by some environmental justice groups. And the training provided the tools to the trainees, to volunteers like myself, to pay the information forward. And for me, there were a couple of eye-openers with this approach. Next slide. There's really three I'll pass on. One was just the blunt the blunt information that renewable energies, and you see in this slide, solar and wind, are today cheaper than fossil fuels. Next slide. Another eye-opener for me was that this process of moving to a renewable, sustainable economy has great environmental and social justice potential. In the past, you needed a stable government, or you needed stable institutions with a grid network to distribute it out. Much of the renewable is very, very local. And then next slide. And then the third point I'll mention that was an eye-opener was, Vice President Gore mentioned, we're not doomed. We have the solutions at hand. And in fact, fairly recent research has shown that if we can stabilize our CO2 here in the atmosphere, that it used to be felt that it was going to be 25 to 30 years we'd feel the rising temperatures and the effects, but now it's felt it's going to be a much shorter lag time, that we can really turn this around in 3 to 5 years because of the new understanding of the carbon storage in the ocean, the sequestration. So the approach, motivated myself and the volunteers to speak to groups, public groups at libraries, churches, and to meet with legislators. So the climate reality approach really provided a framework for me to continue learning via the blogs and discussion groups. So that's an approach that I have experienced as a volunteer. So.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Neda?
Great, thanks so much. So at the Inclusive Center for Resiliency and Clean Energy, as you mentioned in my intro, we're helping to build a network of credit unions that are offering climate-friendly financing. We think that credit unions are very uniquely positioned to operate in this space. We think that they already know how to provide financing and financial services to low and moderate income communities and BIPOC communities in a way that the traditional financial system is maybe not as good at. And as we heard in the earlier panel, the Climate Crisis Resiliency panel, credit unions are already serving as financial first responders in the wake of climate disasters. So they're already playing a role in this because they have to, because their communities are already being impacted. So inclusive is part of our advocacy work is to ensure that credit unions are included as key financial players in developing community-based climate finance solutions. We want to make sure that those are inclusive, accessible, and affordable. So in order to do that, we've been partnering with NGOs, research institutions, with grassroots community organizers, with industry associations, often with city, county, and state governments to find opportunities to include credit unions into different forms of legislation, different sort of draft legislation that we see being formed all over the country. And so we've been paying really close attention to the language that is in, for example, the different federal legislation that we've been seeing, like the Build Back Better Act, to ensure that credit unions are included, community-based lenders are included, CDFIs, minority depositories, et cetera. And we also pay close attention to the language that's defining who should be served, the target populations that most need climate solutions. Often we see, historically, we've seen that if target populations aren't defined carefully, then a new set of capital that is from federal or state dollars might actually not reach the populations that need it. So one area that's very timely right now is, as I said, the Build Back Better Act. We've seen over $300 billion in that act that's proposed for renewable clean energy and energy efficiency. And so we've been working hard to like I said, through our network of partners to really create a space and language that makes those dollars available to credit unions to deploy. We're still working on it. It's a work in progress, but that's kind of a recap of how we've been approaching advocacy in the climate space.
Thanks so much. And I have been working on a lot of similar stuff at the Climate Reality Project around the current federal legislation that's being considered, the Build Back Better Act, which includes right now $555 billion in climate spending, which is really exciting. It would be the largest investment in climate in our country's history by far. And some of the priorities that we're working on at Climate Reality include the National Climate Bank, or Greenhouse Gas Reductions Fund, which is supposed to really mobilize a lot of private sector capital to move more money into clean energy technology and making sure that people have the resources they need to move to clean energy in their own lives. Todd, your work centers around a policy framework to address climate change called the Earth Bill. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how it intersects with the climate provisions in President Biden's Build Back Better Act currently being debated in Congress?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here today. I really enjoyed watching a bit of the program yesterday and was excited to hear folks talking about counting carbon impacts and hearing bankers talk in concrete terms about implementing change across portfolios and educating customers as they're funding real action. It's very exciting, very exciting. Before I jump into the Earth Bill, I just want to emphasize, I come from the grassroots. I believe all change happens there. And I jumped into this in 2015 when I read some of the big green websites and found out that the timeline was terrifying and the trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions was terrifying. So I'd just like to emphasize that I put a link in the chat about the carbon clock. We have less than 8 years of our pollution right now before we are committed, locked into 1.5 degrees global warming, after which we enter into a zone of irreversible tipping points. And even with the NDC pledges under the Paris Accord, we're headed to a 16% increase in greenhouse gases by 2030, which equates to a 2.7 degrees warming by 2100. And that's just based on pledges, which are not really even enforceable. So we don't even have pledges, to reach what the goals that we're setting. So my focus has been on growing the legislative capacity and strategy of the grassroots and the movement at large. And I fundamentally see my role as playing a legislative director for the people. And I've been doing it all volunteer for several years, just now getting a little funding in place to make the legislative process accessible so the uninitiated can join in and make the movement transparent and inclusive so we can grow in numbers and power. So the Earth Bill, I'm happy to talk about it, is a new proposed piece of legislation that is intended to be simple and clear, which is not easy in this context. It would mandate in law 100% shift by 2030 in 3 key industries: electricity, requiring utilities to procure 100% renewables; car manufacturers to produce 100% zero emission vehicles; and agriculture, requiring 100% regenerative agriculture by major food and animal corporations. So it's electricity, cars, and food. All consumer items, it's all of our spending every day that goes to fuel these industries that are polluting the planet. These would solve 80% of our pollution solution and 100% of our political solution, in that it targets the key corporate industries with essentially oligarchy level control, not only of the markets, but of our governments. It's in a small government, private sector solution that is mandates tied to shifting polluting inputs away from polluting inputs. No more fossil fuels and toxic pesticides, et cetera. And that's key because then it gives the private sector the certainty of demand for renewable and electric vehicles, so that then capitalism, which has a lot of downsides, it also has some upsides. it has the potential to then kick into full gear to finance and build the transition. So businesses and bankers generally like this kind of clarity, and so do Republicans usually. And I worked for 3 Republican governors, and Democrats seem pretty enamored with the capitalist system as well. So we also believe that if the activists and movements unite behind these 3 fronts, we could then have enough political power to actually make it happen, no matter who is in charge of the politics. So the desperation is there, the time has run out, and the consequences of inaction are beyond imagination. So we need a crystallized demand that we believe in, that we know is a real solution, and then to unite around it so the people's passion can really make it happen. And I believe that passion is there. I've been arrested with this movement several times. We were in DC in full force. I know that the passion is there if we can crystallize the demand. Now I was asked to talk about the BBA, but I'll wait and see if you want me to dive into that separately or next.
Yeah, if you wanted to just really quickly mention a couple of the intersections between your work on the Earth Bill and the Build Back Better Act, that'd be
Sure.
great. Yeah.
So the Build Back Better Act, and the infrastructure bill provide a number of incredible incentives for funding a variety of clean energy efforts, all critical seed money for the transition, EV infrastructure, a new transmission agency to fix the interstate transmission problems, a green bank with targeting for disadvantaged and rural communities, a civilian climate corps to plant billions of trees. Also has direct pay incentives for solar panels, electric water heaters, electric heat pumps, and other industry incentives. It's all incredible things, but it's ultimately pennies on the dollar compared to what's needed to transition to a fully clean economy in the time permitted. And you're all familiar with incentives and tax incentives and grants and loan programs. You know how critical they are, but you also know that you don't know how fast businesses are going to use them and how fast the projects will be built. So that's the difference between incentives in the Earth Bill and a mandate that's clear. The Earth Bill says we're going to stop greenhouse gas pollution in 3 major sectors by 2030, and that dirty inputs will no longer be allowed. And as I said, that creates a very clear market demand. It's also critical for to have a litmus test for candidates, so we know who to vote for going to 2022. We need to elect a pro-climate majority to break through the opposition's grasp on our government. And I believe that the Earth Bill has the power to do that. So we encourage you to look at the website. There's over 40 groups and 250 citizens from dozens of local groups. And it's in the early stage, but we have 3 co-sponsors lined up and are working to find a lead sponsor. So the BBA, which is still in flux and we need help. There's a meeting on Wednesday that I put in the chat, hosted by Climate Action Campaign and the Combined Defense Project, which was one of the larger coalitions working on this, among others. And they're having an open community meeting on Wednesday, and everyone's welcome to that so you can figure out where the key targets are, what the key pressure points are for the next few weeks as we bring this home after many, many months of wrangling. We need everyone to help with this. Thank you.
And hopefully the House will pass the bill this week, and then the Senate hopefully this year. They move slowly. But yeah. But we, in order to get to this point where we are really on the brink of truly historic climate legislation, and in the first step of many that we need to tackle this crisis at the scale that it demands, we got here because of regular people who got in this fight, and found their passion and found a way for them to plug into the climate movement. As we've talked about, and as our panelists really show, there are so many different angles through which this crisis needs to be addressed, and so many different ways and entry points for people to get involved. So I'd love to talk really quick about the importance of volunteerism in the climate movement and successful advocacy. Jeff, because you're a volunteer with my organization, the Climate Reality Project, I'd love to start with you.
Oh, great, and could I get the 6th slide? So, for me, we're in this all together. And from what I've experienced, as a volunteer, if each volunteer, each informed person can speak to 5 or 6 people, and make sense to those people and hit home with 2 or 3 of them, and those 2 or 3 in turn can speak to 5 people, and that is paid forward, you know, we can have a huge ripple, you know, a real exponential effect. So when I speak with audiences, well, and actually my hope for you, you know, when I speak with audiences, I ask them to do really 3 things. You know, I ask them to use their voices. To speak to their, you know, relatives, their family, their friends about the issues, and just to talk about the climate situation, climate reality. And then secondly, I just ask that when they vote, and when you vote, keep the climate situation in mind with the candidates you choose. And then lastly, your choices. We all can't, maybe we all can't put panels where we live, or we all can't get an electric vehicle right now, but we can make smaller choices also, as far as using the bicycle a little bit more, and also in your choices. So, you know, together, you know, we can't dawdle. As you've just heard, it is urgent, but you know, we can do this. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Todd, you mentioned you've been arrested a few times doing civil disobedience, demanding climate action. I have too, through my work with the Sunrise Movement. Not everybody has to get arrested to get involved in the climate movement. But what can you tell us about the importance of volunteerism in the climate movement and advocacy specifically?
Well, I'll tell you this, after 5 years, really digging in and getting deep inside the climate movement, and I say this with love and appreciation for all the experts and professionals I've met in this arena, now working in many coalitions. The environmental movement is largely embedded with the political parties. Even the progressive wing is now somewhat embedded, the Working Families Party and the DNC and Bernie Sanders and Schumer, they all worked a common strategy. So there's no light between the movement and the government. And that's not a good thing when you're trying to force change against the political status quo. So there's nothing more important than the citizens getting involved, in my opinion. So our group, for example, has open meetings, and it's inclusive and transparent. And we have teams in over 100 congressional districts. It's the local leader, the local veteran activist that's been with the 350 NYC 350 chapter, or the Sierra Club chapter, Climate Reality chapters, or Climate Iowa, or you name it, Fridays for the Future. And it's all the grassroots folks who don't have a place at that big table, and we're creating that flow of information from the top to the people so they can get more directly involved. But to me, it's critical, and it's very important for business associations and bankers and academia to get involved and to just bring that brass tacks to this fight that are not worried more about their relationships with candidates and politicians in their careers, but are really singularly focused on, you know, mandating an end to greenhouse gas pollution. So your role is instrumental, and I think it's critical. And if we don't get more folks involved at that level, we're not going to win this fight, because, as I say, the paradigm and the status quo is sort of locked in, which is why change hasn't happened in all these many decades, in my opinion. So we need you. You can go to our website and join our Adopted District program, and we'll keep you informed on the latest legislative agenda, and we'll guide you through contacting your legislature about the Earth Bill and a whole array of climate bills that we're working on as a package on forestry, and I won't go through the topics. There are a lot of other bills out there. We need you, and we need bankers in particular who can really think in terms of getting things done, and you know how to organize your communities and businesses in ways that other activists don't generally do.
You know, I do want to, I know we're running a little over and I want to get us into our breakout rooms, but Netta, you know, I know when we're talking about this, is there a way you think credit unions specifically can be part of this kind of legislative conversation? You know, this conversation where our voices can be constructive and credit unions can be centered in the solution, as well as, you know, because of our close connection to our communities. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, well, I think connect with the United in Sustainability Network, connect with the Inclusive Network. We've been doing research on credit unions involved in climate-friendly finance, and there are 292 credit unions across the country that are currently offering or developing green financing products, and collectively they represent over 17.3 million members and $283 billion in combined assets. And so there's a lot of room for growth in just doing the thing that credit unions already do well, which is lending. And then we've also seen a lot of opportunity to get involved more locally or regionally, finding areas where there might be a way for credit unions to advocate for support for green lending and climate resilience in their communities. We've also seen that they have partners in terms of potentially in their regional or state credit union associations and other industry groups that are also interested in advocating alongside or for their credit union members. So, I mean, and as I said earlier, Inclusive is doing the same. And then we have a training course that is, I'm going to put it in the chat. It is free. It's in solar lending. It's for credit union professionals. It's through the University of New Hampshire. Our next cohorts start in January, and we're accepting applications right now. So the link to apply is here, but we can help you to build your solar loan program and product for your financial institution. So we welcome everyone to apply to that.
Thank you, Netta. I mean, I feel like we heard earlier panelists, like how connected credit unions are to the communities and to the impacts, pop-up branches. And I just feel like we need to have we should be the go-to voice in our communities and the go-to facilitator of really trying to deliver these funds into our communities too, right? I think both directions, credit unions should be playing a bigger role here. So we're running a little bit late on time, but thank you everyone. Thank you panel for that. We're gonna jump into our breakout rooms now to continue the conversation more one-on-one. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, panelists, everyone. So we're gonna ask everyone, we're gonna be as quick, we're gonna have to come back quicker than normal. We're gonna ask everyone to, try to select their spokesperson so that when we come back, you at least have one or two groups to be able to share. So what we're gonna be talking about today in our breakout rooms is, in light of the pandemic and social justice movements, will you develop or change your CSR or ESG plans, environmental, social, or governance plans for 2022 in your credit union? If not, if so, how? Tell us. So we're going to break into our breakout rooms and come back afterwards and hopefully have an invigorating conversation there. Thank you, everybody. See you on the other side. All right, welcome back. I think we have just about everyone back. Hopefully everyone can see me. All right, so I think we are going to only have time, but if you guys on the room, if you guys can, in the chat, why don't you guys go ahead and share what you guys heard back in your breakout rooms. Is there any one group who is just definitely wanting to, or do I just call on my group, but who definitely wants to share what they heard, who had actually a really good conversation or something that was really interesting in 1 minute? Well, I might then just call on Patricia. Patricia, do you want to just give us a quick little run up of what we heard, and then everyone else can share in the chat, and then we'll move on to our next part of the program.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Well, the conversation was very interesting. We had very nice thoughts from Lucas from the Harvard University Employees Credit Union. And of course, a part of the discussion was that before the pandemic and after the pandemic, everything changed completely. And that, of course, there is not only good to do good, but it's also good for our business. So like networks like Inclusive that can help us build this goodwill and offer products more accessible to all the community is a great opportunity. And for example, in the case of Harvard, that was a good incentive to perhaps keep all the students after graduating engaged with the credit union. So we also talk about the importance of meeting goals. We talk about the goals that UNFCU has from the 2025, and that these goals need to be readjusted and change all the time to make sure that we meet them. And I don't know if I'm missing anything. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. So thank you for being my volunteer. And as we move on to the next phase of that, please, anyone continue in the chat if you have anything you want to share that was really important from your conversation. So, next we're going to gather for one last of our fireside chats. I like how we call those. I was thinking about putting a little Yule log or something behind me in my Zoom background, but and we really want to take credit unions to the next level on sustainability. I think that's really important, and galvanize your attention around these important topics. So we're going to have a case study with Vancity, a longtime leader in sustainability out of Vancouver, British Columbia. And we'll hear from Joe Westwood, Manager of Climate Strategy and Performance at Vancity. Vancity is Canada's largest community credit union with a commitment to a clean and fair world, and actually sort of a North Star, I know, to UNFCU specifically inside, and I'm sure throughout the North as well, right? So, and to moderate this conversation, we welcome Leila Ramahi. Leila is a regional coordinator of the United Nations Environment Programme's Principles for Responsible Investments, also known as UNEP PRI. Leila has over 13 years experience in the financial industry and market analysis, strategy, as well as product and business development. She's an MBA from banking and finance and executive certification for sustainable business practices and management from the University of California, San Diego. Leila specializes in developing business strategy and project management, focused on sustainability, integration, and strategy alignment. So given the subject matter expertise that we have here, I'm sure we're gonna have a great conversation on measuring our sustainability progress and a deep dive into impact analysis. Leila, turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's a good afternoon to everyone, and it's fantastic to be here with you today. Thank you for hosting us for this discussion. As Tom introduced me, I'm here with you from UNEP Finance Initiative. And for those who are not familiar with us, we are a partnership between the UN Environment Programme and the global financial sector. And our focus is to mobilize private sector finance towards sustainable development. We work with member banks, insurers, investors globally, and may be focused on delivering positive impact that serves people and the planet while we drive real economic growth. We are maybe more familiar through our principles. Probably you've come to know about them. I think Tom just mentioned the principles for responsible investment. That is a focus on an investment industry, but I think to be mindful of the time, we're going to dive into the principles for responsible banking. For those who are not familiar with the principles, they are 6 principles launched with the Secretary General in 2019 with 130 banks globally. And now in 2 years, we are over 250 banks globally, representing over 40% of the global banking assets across different jurisdictions across the globe, and representing different sizes of balance sheets, focus, and commitment on working towards aligning their strategy with society's objectives towards Paris Agreement and the SDGs. So without taking you into a lot of details on the PRBs, as we call them, the Principles for Responsible Banking, it is generally a framework that provides the opportunity to focus on longer term sustainability, not just look at sustainability from the concept of a transaction or a portfolio, but generally as a strategy. But without further ado, I am really very excited to be hosting this Fireside Chat because I am joined by Joe Westwood, as introduced, the Manager of Climate Strategy and Performance at Vancity. Joe, I'm very sorry, hours with you are not enough, to be very honest, and it's always great to hear about your journey. So let's just dive into it. Tell us more about Vancity, your sustainability journey. How are you looking at it, and how has been the Principles for Responsible Banking for you as a signatory?
Yeah, thanks, Layali, and thanks everyone for inviting me. I was able to hop on for the last 45 minutes, and it made me hopeful to hear about all the great work that's happening across credit unions in the US, and especially for me, the articulation of why credit unions are so well positioned to get involved in solving the climate crisis. So Vancity does have a long history of social and environmental leadership, and I could list many firsts and milestones along the way. But I wanted to start with our climate commitments and reflect on what led up to these, including the role of the principles for responsible banking. I'm not going to go through our climate commitments. There are 5 of them. I just wanted to touch on 2, which is our net zero by 2040 commitment across all our mortgages and loans. Extremely ambitious commitment. And we're in the process of setting our first round of near-term climate targets. And the other one, which I like to see is very much integrated in our net zero commitment, is financing an equitable climate transition. And we see those as going hand in hand. And to the points made earlier, we see credit unions as particularly well positioned in that area, given our strong social roots. So in terms of what brought us to our climate commitments, the first factor will come as no surprise. We were experiencing, like everyone here, a world that was changing really, really quickly around us. Black Lives Matter, the pandemic, the climate crisis, all of these things. And these shed and continue to shed light on some deeply problematic systemic issues, but they also shed light on the opportunities to bring about meaningful change. So I would say the pandemic in particular crystallized the connection between climate action and the need for financial institutions, not just to think about reducing emissions, but also how we look at equality and people through the transition. Some other factors, and it's always interesting. I've been at Vancity for quite a few years, and it's really interesting to reflect at where we've come. And over the years, our sustainability at Vancity has evolved to a decentralized and integrated model, which is exactly where we need it to be. And by that, I mean we have clear accountabilities for various aspects of sustainability embedded across the organization in all our departments. And we also have just one business and sustainability strategy that are integrated, but obviously there's a lot of strategies that sit a layer beneath our business strategy as well. But that can also mean that sometimes we've lacked focus and we've missed opportunities to coordinate and align efforts across the organization. We've got so many people working on things. And another thing we saw happening was, while we've done some great work, and I could spend hours talking about the work we've done to track and understand and communicate our impact, in particular the positive contributions of our lending, including which sustainable development goals our loans contribute to, we've made much less progress when it comes to understanding and proactively managing the potential negative impact of our loans, including financed emissions. And I think here it's really important to remember that positive and negative impacts don't neutralize each other. They need to be thought of and managed quite separately. And then I think the third point is that we were seeing the emergence, and still are the emergence, of really robust sustainable finance and green and social lending guidelines and taxonomies. And so we also want to make sure that as we move forward, the way we classify and talk and label our products and loans is credible and consistent with those best practices. And so I'd say that's, we took a step back and we decided to accelerate and deepen our work by focusing efforts on the areas of most significant impact. And that's where the PRB came into play, both positive and negative, being really clear about our goals and the outcomes we're trying to achieve. Working with others globally and locally to collaborate and figure out the how, because some of the things we're working on where we don't have the answers yet, but being part of those networks is incredibly valuable. And then grounding our work in science and data and co-creating and using harmonized and credible approaches and frameworks. So as much as possible, we're all doing the same things in the same way and talking a common language. And so very quickly, that's what you know, we launched our climate commitments, and to help achieve those commitments, I would say 2 initiatives in particular have really helped drive that work, and that's a Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, and which is a global standard for measuring financed emissions, and the Principles for Responsible Banking. And within the PRB, we also signed on to their collective commitment to climate action, and more recently, the UN-led Net Zero Banking Alliance. I don't think everyone needs to sign up to these initiatives and all these voluntary make these commitments, but for us, it's been really helpful in crystallizing what we need to do and just sharing the ways forward with others. So I would say joining PCAF and the PRB, they both helped us more fulsomely understand and communicate our negative as well as our positive impacts within the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. And as I mentioned, PCAF has helped us measure our financed emissions. We've disclosed those. We're now working on things like data quality and expanding our disclosures. And for us, I think we get a lot of comfort in using harmonized approaches. We feel that adds credibility to our work, and it also allows us to speak a common language and collaborate with others. So I'm gonna pause there, and feel free to post questions in the chat, by the way, if I say anything that you'd like more details on. I was gonna throw it over to you, Lily, just to bring it up a level and to talk about you have such an amazing view of what's going on with financial institutions. So just curious to understand what you're seeing when it comes to sustainability and climate trends across financial institutions, and what you see as the opportunities for credit unions to play a key role.
Well, that's a great question, Joe, and I think we need to unpack everything that you have said in terms of the great work that Vancity is doing. But I think coming at it, as we heard across the past 2 days, and as shared by all the colleagues and all the great work that the credit unions are doing on the ground, I think what I would like to just stress on again and again and again, that regardless of whatever we hear, where you are in the world, where the financial institution, which sector, what they are focusing on, a bank, a credit union, the challenges are the same, and the road to work together is the same. It's not just only a matter of larger financial institutions and smaller financial institutions. Climate risk and opportunity is going to impact everyone. Social and environmental and growth issues are connected together, and they will transition for all participants. So how are we going to unpack it from that perspective? How can we unpack it from global commitments as we come out of COP and we look at the regional, and from a national to regional to sub-regional to how the impact can reach a transaction and to a final portfolio? So how are we working together in terms of pushing the limits? How are we moving towards transitioning all of our economies? And this is where I think we need to focus on the role that credit unions play, and how their role in the system is very critical. I think starting with a very critical eye at it, why are we going to talk to credit unions when we have financiers of the grayest or financiers with biggest books? Why would we look at that? And I think we need to remember that it's a collective effort, and it's a contagion risk that we need to look at. Does that mean, as you mentioned, that all financial institutions need to sign on to all of the commitments that are out there? That's not necessary, but it's a great guidance. And this is where we come at it from the Principles for Responsible Banking perspective and the theory of change. It is not about only just knowing that by 2050 we need to reach somewhere. What are we doing now, and what is the guidance? Where is that pathway? And this is where we need to look at things from a perspective of an overarching strategy and putting impact at the heart of what we do as financial institutions. Now, just generally looking at it from a credit union's perspective, the report by FSOC and the view from the National Credit Union Administration was very clear. Not just to focus on the risks in terms of climate change and the social movement and the need for a just transition. credit unions can be very exposed and close to communities in terms of their financing, whether the financing products, not just from a macro perspective, but from a micro perspective. So if we're looking at how does that impact your mortgages, your loans, how are you exposed in that, but also looking not just at stranded assets in terms of we do not finance oil and gas, or we do not have any gray business, but you might have stranded communities. Your credit union membership might be affiliated to the oil industry, to the agriculture industry in particular, and there are a lot of changes that can even affect your membership in that sense. So these are impacts, but how are they opportunities as well? So I think this is where we need to start to measure a baseline, to look at the longer term journey and how can we transition the real economy towards more sustainably and benefit altogether in that journey. So I think this is where we need to look at it not just as risk, not as reporting requirements, and we know that reporting requirements are coming, not just from a TCFD or risk framework, but from a strategic framework in terms of what is best for all of us collectively. And with that, I'll leave it to you, Joe. And I think from that concept of looking at a longer term perspective and looking at, as you mentioned, the PRB and measuring impact, I would like to unpack that with you a bit. Looking at impact and making impact more, not as a product, but as I like to call it, the core of your strategy. And to simplify, I always say what we do is we're greening the vanilla. We're not just adding another amount of finance from our balance sheet to add value, but no, making sure that all of our vanilla products are actually turning themselves sustainable and green. So tell us more from your side. What do you think? Is my view a bit closer to your experience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things you said really resonated in terms of, you know, we need everyone to be involved, I think, in the climate transition. And I think there's a risk to leaving it just to the big players and the big banks and the big industries. And, you know, as credit unions, right, we serve low and moderate income groups, we serve small and medium-sized enterprises. All of those folks are crucial to both the climate transition, but also a just transition. And small and medium-sized enterprises are the largest employers in the world, and they're huge employers in British Columbia. So leaving them out of the conversation just doesn't seem like an option. So as I said, I feel as a credit union, we're really well positioned to have a voice and to influence at the policy level, whatever that looks like. We know that policy for us is going to be a huge lever that we're going to pull, both in terms of the federal government, provincial governments. We also work at the city level. And so understanding where the policy direction is heading and where the key gaps are, especially as we start to set our near-term climate goals. We really need to understand what the gaps are there. And so that will be, we've actually, well, we only had one on our working on our government relations team, but now we have two. So I can say we doubled our resources in government relations, specifically to work more in the climate and the just transition space. I know we don't have a lot of time. I don't know what's most helpful. I could do a bit of a deeper dive into the impact analysis tool, or talk more about how we're measuring finance emissions. I don't know what would be most helpful to folks. I don't know if we have any questions in particular to address.
Well, I don't see, maybe I need to look into questions, but I'm happy to take the questions as you mentioned. But in general, before I look at the questions, I think before going into deep diving, I think it's great to hear from you, Joe, a bit about connecting generally impact, but also on climate, as unpacking how you looked at measuring your footprint, more or less, how you're connecting that to your operations and your targets. I think connecting both together might sound like an interesting idea as I look into the questions here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we kind of knew climate was a key impact area of ours. The PRB, going through the PRB, so for everyone here, they have a really helpful tool that's available online. It's kind of an output tool, where you enter the key business activities you're involved in. So it could be giving mortgages, it could be supporting low income members to access credit. It could be providing certain loans to specific business sectors. So those are all inputs into the tool. It also takes the local context into account, which is really, really super important, because you need to understand your impacts, and then you also need to understand your local context. What are the needs in your community, and so on and so forth. So bringing those two pieces together, it will then highlight your potential positive and negative impacts. And for us, one was clearly climate. And so it kind of validated the work we'd been doing and the thinking we'd been doing. And the other one for us was financial inclusion and health. And the financial inclusion and health one is interesting because there's a potential positive impact by providing access to credit and basic banking services for underserved group, but then there's also the negative impact that can arise from that if you don't do it in a responsible way. So all of those things we have a much better picture, and I think we're able to see the connectivities between those various areas of impact, and we need to do more work to articulate the connectivities, I would say, and make sure when we work in one area, we're not negatively affecting another area. So those are all things we're thinking through. On the climate side, we really didn't have a sense of where our impacts were until we began to measure our financed emissions. We have highly estimated data right now, but it's been extremely valuable in able to pinpoint for us where are the hot spots. And so we know amongst our business members, it's manufacturing, construction, and health services. We know amongst homeowners, it's single family homes who use natural gas. And so we're now able to pinpoint those areas, start to develop education campaigns, products and services, also just understand where our members are at. And so find the best ways we can support them and meet them where they are right now, but take them to kind of where they need to go as well.
Well, just being very mindful of time, and Tom, I'll take 30 seconds there to just end it with Joe, and we're going to end it on a very happy note, and we're going to end it with, we know it's a huge challenge, we might be behind or not, and as Cop said, 1.5 is barely alive, but it's still there. But Joe, it's a great challenge, and I want to take one of the challenges that actually is on the ground is, as a financial institution with limited resources, being faced with all of this. You need to prioritize, you need to jump in, and every effort is appreciated. So your advice or your recommendation to other colleagues that are on this journey, how would you organize internally, and where would you tackle it from?
Yeah, really quickly on that, it needs to be a priority from the top down. Like you can, there's so many like-minded colleagues I'm sure you work with, but if it's not seen as a priority for leadership, the work won't get done. So that's been the key learning for us. Like now we have these climate commitments. We have a climate council at the VP level. We talk to each other, we figure out where the roadblocks are, and we get the work done. And that's been instrumental in finding the resources that we need. But also just generally in terms of resources, there's so much thinking that's been done out there. There's so many resources that are available already. And I'd also say look to industry associations to get the conversations started. And as Lyle said, we're not in this alone. Everyone is facing the same challenges. So we need to collaborate and co-create those roadmaps and resources that we can then all use to move in the right direction. And, I think for all of us, we can find our niche too, right? We don't have to do everything. Like all of us have particular membership, particular context that we're working within. So find your niche and start there.
Well, just Tom, are we at the top of the hour, or can I ask the question you just did?
I do want to. It's hard. I mean, I would love to keep going, and maybe we can keep the Zoom going after we let everyone go. But we do have to wrap it up. But I do want to remind everyone. I know, Joe, you guys are so advanced. But there are so many people. I was just on a breakout room with Harvard University Federal Credit Union. They're just starting on their journey, and I want to make sure everyone knows that's kind of what we were kind of trying to build with that roadmap tool. Is that we started with just an 8-person green team that organically got some goodwill building that got executive attention, that started the ball rolling, that got where Joe is, right? So you don't, that was kind of what we saw when we looked at our own development and realized, oh, you don't have to be at Van City level. You don't try to be at Van City level date when you're going to fail, right? But I do want to ask one specific question, because you are sort of on the other side of the rainbow now, right? At one level, does it penetrate with your members? Do they see this? Like, you guys are so integrated. Is it something that's table stakes to them, or is it a differentiator as you as a cooperative? Because I think that's
it's such a great question. So actually, I'd say we're a bit ahead of where our members are at.
Yeah,
I mean, we talk to our members a lot, and so we understand that for them, top of mind is kind of the financial health and inclusion piece of work. And so I think our strategy is to make sure that they see the connection between climate and that. And that's a good starting point. But we also need to do a lot more awareness and just to bring our members along. So I wouldn't say it's top of mind I would say it's top of mind for some of our members, but definitely not all.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. I know I apologize, Lily and Joe, for feeling like I have to rush the conversation at the end. But there's just, these conversations can just keep going. But again, Van City, Lily, please, there are some requests for all the resources you guys are mentioning. Please share them in the chat. We're really trying to collect all these resources into a place that credit unions could come and find them depending on where they are in their journey, so that when they're ready to consume something like the Consumer Responsible Banking's tools, they're ready to do that. Or if it's just something simple like some simple volunteerism, they can engage there. So thank you everybody for that. And thank everyone so far. I'm going to conclude with a few closing thoughts, and I'm going to bring back Prasad Surapaneni, again, our co-executive sponsor, UNFCU's GSP, and the SVP of Chief Information Officer at UNFCU. Prasad, please close us out today.
Thanks, Tom. Wow, 2 days just flew by. I guess that's what happens when you're having fun. I echo what Michael from Civic said yesterday. It is cool to be with people who dare to dream. I guess we are the people who are dreaming to stop the nightmare of 1.5 degrees warming and climate and social injustices. To echo Cynthia from UNA USA yesterday, fire is not in the next door anymore, it is in our backyard. We have taken the first steps to start putting out the fire. We have been clamoring for tools and guidance and learn from each other. That's what precisely happened here over the last 2 days. With great insights from keynotes, presentations, and panel discussions, and with your active engagement. We are now familiar with setting sustainability goals and objectives, the importance of monitoring, impact analysis, and reporting on progress towards sustainability. The existence of global standards and guidelines, as well as resources such as Cosmin & Company, Climate Reality, Inclusive, PRB, as just we heard, also proved invaluable takeaways. I think we all believe in the power of advocacy and agree that the UN Sustainable Development Goals serve as a unifier, a connecting language for us. Claire mentioned yesterday and sounded the alarm that much more needs to be done to achieve these goals. We shared a wealth of information at the summit. Thanks for your support and active participation. I also want to thank the entire UIS organization team, including Tom, Liz, Carlos, and way too many to mention here, for their tireless efforts to make this summit a huge success. Before we leave Zoom, you have another opportunity to help grow our movement. As you heard, the United in Sustainability Network will host a Zoom meeting on 7th of December. Your thoughts and ideas on our industry leadership and priorities are of great interest to us. We want to continue these important discussions on sustainability and obtain your feedback. We hope that many of you can join Tom and UNFC GSP colleagues, Patrick Seiler and Liz Philippe, as well as Carlos Calderon in December for 2022 planning. Look for more information about this event in the weeks ahead. Until then, be well, everyone. Thank you again for your participation. Over to you, Tom.
Again, thank you, Prasad. Thank you, everyone. As you said, there are too many people behind the scenes to thank for this. It is a huge labor of love that we put in to try to make this happen. Thank you to all the presenters and moderators and panelists. This event is something we all do to be extra to help our industry and help each other. I think it's kind of core to what it means to be a credit union, to be a credit in the credit union industry. So again, Please contact with our LinkedIn group with our email address. We want to see each of you reach the next level when it comes to sustainability. And if we can help each other get there, that's all the better. And it shows the kind of invaluable contribution credit unions make in their communities. So let's hope we can all build a better world where SDGs become localized and integrated like they did at Van City and impact our communities. And we look forward to talking to you and your feedback in December to chart where we go forward in 2022 and beyond. Thank you, everybody. Be well, be safe. Thank you for joining us for the summit.